Daniel Cross's hands were buried chest deep in a dying man when he realized the system that killed his wife was about to claim another victim. 5 years of silence. 5 years of pretending to be just another exhausted ER nurse. But tonight, in Trauma Bay 3, with monitors screaming and residents frozen in panic, Daniel made a choice that would shatter everything he'd buried. The experimental protocol he used was supposed to stay hidden forever, erased from military records, forbidden by every medical board in the country. He saved the man's life in 4 minutes flat, and someone was watching. Subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Memorial General's emergency department never stopped humming. Daniel Cross had worked under them for 3 years, and the sound had become part of his body, a constant vibration beneath his sternum that he only noticed when he left the building. Tonight, though, the hum felt different, sharper, like the edge of something waiting to break through. He stood at the nurse's station, finishing charts from the previous shift. His handwriting was neat, functional, forgettable, just like everything else about him. 38 years old, average height, the kind of face people looked past in grocery stores. His scrubs were faded navy, his ID badge slightly crooked. Daniel Cross, RN. Nothing more. Cross, you picking up the overtime on Thursday? The voice belonged to Marcus Liu, one of the ER attendings who actually remembered Daniel's name. That put him in the minority. Daniel didn't look up from the chart. Can't. Evan's got a thing at school. Right, the kid. Marcus's tone carried the particular sympathy people reserve for single fathers, a mix of respect and pity that Daniel had learned to ignore. How's he doing? He's 16. Marcus laughed, but it faded when he realized Daniel wasn't joking. The older nurse returned to his charts. There was nothing else to say. Evan was 16, which meant he was angry, which meant he barely spoke to Daniel anymore, which meant their apartment felt like a waiting room where two strangers happened to sleep under the same roof. The radio on Daniel's belt crackled. Incoming trauma. MVA. 2 vehicles. ETA 4 minutes. Bay 3. Daniel clipped his pen to his pocket and headed toward the trauma bay. His movements were efficient, practiced, unremarkable. He pulled on a gown, snapped gloves over his hands, and positioned himself by the equipment cart. 2 residents rushed in behind him, followed by Dr. Sarah Vance, the trauma attending who treated everyone below her rank like they were personally responsible for her exhaustion. Cross, you're on airway management if we need it, she said without looking at him. Try not to get in the way. He nodded. She'd forget he was there in about 30 seconds. The ambulance bay doors crashed open. Paramedics wheeled in a gurney moving too fast, which meant the patient was crashing. Daniel's eyes tracked the scene in pieces. Male, mid-40s, pale as printer paper, blood soaking through the sheets. The lead paramedic was calling out vitals, but Daniel was already reading the man's body, the way his chest barely moved, the angle of his neck, the particular shade of blue starting at his lips. BP's 70/40 and dropping, the paramedic said. Lost his pulse twice on the way in. We got him back, but... Move, Dr. Vance snapped, and suddenly there were 8 people surrounding the gurney, all trying to do different things at once. One resident fumbled with the IV line. Another called for O-negative blood. Dr. Vance was shouting orders that contradicted each other, and the monitors were screaming, and Daniel saw it happen in slow motion. The patient's stats plummeting, the resident's hands shaking too hard to place the central line. Vance's face going from annoyed to genuinely scared. He's in V-fib, someone said. Charging to 200, someone else answered. Daniel's hands moved before his brain caught up. He stepped forward, placed 2 fingers against the patient's carotid, felt the absence of a pulse, and made a decision he'd promised himself he'd never make again. Stop. The word cut through the chaos like a blade. Everyone froze. Dr. Vance stared at him. Excuse me? The shocks won't work, Daniel said. His voice was calm, almost flat. His core temp's too low. You're going to burn his heart out before you restart it. Cross, unless you've suddenly become a physician, do you want to save him or follow protocol? The room went silent except for the monitors. Dr. Vance's face flushed red, but before she could respond, the patient's rhythm went flatline. Daniel didn't wait for permission. He moved to the head of the bed, hands already calculating angles and pressure points most nurses never learned. I need warm saline, 2 liters, rapid infuser, and get me a pressure bag for the O-neg. You can't, one of the residents started. Do it, Dr. Vance said quietly. She was watching Daniel now, really watching him. Everyone else, hands off. Let him work. Daniel's mind shifted into a place he hadn't visited in 5 years. The room disappeared. The people disappeared. There was only the body in front of him and the systematic process of pulling it back from the edge. He placed the IV with one smooth motion, hung the warm saline, and began a modified CPR sequence that had been taught to exactly 47 people in a military facility that officially didn't exist. 30 compressions, specific angle, specific depth. Check the airway. Manually ventilate. Watch the monitor. His hands moved like they were remembering a language he'd tried to forget. Fast, precise, absolutely certain. 2 minutes passed. 3. The residents were murmuring. Dr. Vance had her arms crossed, face unreadable. At 4 minutes and 18 seconds, the monitor blipped. Then it blipped again. Then it found a rhythm. I've got a pulse, one of the residents whispered. Daniel stepped back. His hands were steady, but something inside his chest felt cracked open. He stripped off his gloves and walked toward the door. Cross. Dr. Vance's voice stopped him. Where did you learn that? Doesn't matter. The hell it doesn't. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone pull someone back like that. So I'm asking again, where did you learn it? Daniel looked at her. For a moment, he considered telling the truth. Then he remembered why he'd buried it in the first place. YouTube, he said, and walked out. Mustn't. The night shift dragged like it always did. Daniel worked through 6 more patients, nothing critical, just the usual parade of chest pains and twisted ankles and people who thought a rash needed emergency attention at 2 in the morning. He moved through it mechanically, avoiding Dr. Vance and the residents who kept glancing at him like he'd suddenly grown a second head. At 400, he took his break in the staff lounge. The coffee tasted like burnt plastic, but he drank it anyway. The TV on the wall was playing some late-night talk show with the sound off. Daniel watched it without seeing it, his mind stuck in Trauma Bay 3, replaying those 4 minutes over and over. He shouldn't have done it. He'd promised himself after the discharge, after the investigation, after Emily's funeral, that he'd never touch that training again. It was supposed to stay buried with everything else. His phone buzzed. A text from Evan. Staying at Josh's tonight. No question mark, no request for permission, just a statement. Daniel stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Okay. The read receipt appeared immediately, which meant Evan was awake at 4 in the morning. Daniel thought about calling, asking if everything was all right, trying to be the kind of father who knew how to bridge the silence that had grown between them. Instead, he pocketed the phone and finished his coffee. There you are. Daniel looked up. A woman stood in the doorway, late 20s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing street clothes instead of scrubs. She had a visitor badge clipped to her jacket and a look in her eyes that Daniel recognized immediately. She was hunting for something. Can I help you? He asked. Clara Hayes. She stepped into the room but didn't sit down. I'm the one you saved tonight. Well, not me. My father. The MVA patient. Daniel set down his coffee. How's he doing? Stable. They moved him to ICU an hour ago. She studied Daniel's face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. The doctor said he shouldn't have made it, said if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't done whatever you did, he'd be dead. I was just doing my job. No. Clara moved closer. My father's a surgeon. I grew up around hospitals. I know what nurses can do and what they can't do. What you did in that room, that wasn't standard protocol. Then maybe you should talk to Dr. Vance about it. I already did. She said you were former military, said you must have picked up some field medicine techniques. Clara tilted her head. But she also said you've been working here for 3 years and nobody knew you had that kind of training, which seems weird, doesn't it? Having that level of skill and never mentioning it? Daniel stood up. Your father's alive, that's what matters. You're right, it is. Clara didn't move. But I'm also a journalist, Mr. Cross, and I'm very good at finding the stories people don't want to tell. Then you should know when to leave one alone. He walked past her, but her voice followed him into the hallway. I already started looking into your background. Military records, medical licensing, employment history. You're remarkably hard to find, almost like someone tried to erase you. Daniel kept walking. His shift ended in 2 hours, and then he could go home, pull the blackout curtains, and sleep until the noise in his head finally shut up. That was the plan. That had been the plan for 5 years. But plans had a way of falling apart. The sun was coming up when Daniel finally left the hospital. The parking lot was half empty, just a few scattered cars belonging to the night shift stragglers. His truck sat in the back corner, a 15-year-old Ford that burned oil and made a grinding noise whenever he turned left. He'd been meaning to fix it for months. He was halfway across the lot when he noticed the man leaning against his driver's side door. Tall, 50s, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place against the hospital's concrete and exhaust fumes. His face was familiar in the worst way, the kind of familiar that made Daniel's hands curl into fists automatically. "Hello, Daniel." The man's voice was smooth, practiced. "It's been a long time." Daniel stopped walking. "Colonel Morrison." "It's just Morrison now. I retired 3 years ago." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Though I hear you've been doing well. Nursing. Quite a step down from where you were, but steady work, good benefits. What do you want?" Morrison pushed off the truck, moving with the careful ease of someone who'd spent a lifetime making other people nervous. "I want to talk about what happened last night in Trauma Bay 3. How do you— Please, you think I don't keep tabs on the people who went through my program?" Morrison stepped closer. 47 operators, Daniel, all of them with skills that would make them extremely valuable in the right circumstances, and extremely dangerous in the wrong ones. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I got out. I signed the papers. I agreed to the conditions." "You agreed to stay invisible," Morrison corrected, "to never use the training, to let it die with the program." He gestured toward the hospital. "And yet here we are. 4 minutes and 18 seconds of the most advanced life-saving protocol ever developed, performed in front of witnesses, in a hospital with security cameras. I saved a man's life." "You broke protocol. Again." Morrison's voice went cold. "Do you know why the program was shut down, Daniel? Why they sealed the records and scattered everyone involved? Because people died. Because people lived." Morrison stepped closer, close enough that Daniel could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. "The protocols worked too well. They gave field medics capabilities that made surgeons obsolete, made hospital systems nervous, made insurance companies very, very uncomfortable." He smiled. "You can't monetize a miracle, Daniel. Not when it threatens the entire medical infrastructure." Daniel's mind was racing. "If you're here to threaten me, I'm here to offer you a choice." Morrison pulled a business card from his pocket. "There are people who would pay a great deal of money for your skills. Private hospitals. Consulting work. Situations where discretion is valued and questions aren't asked." He held out the card. "Or you can go back to being invisible. Back to pretending you're just another exhausted nurse nobody notices." Daniel didn't take the card. "I have a son." "I know. Evan? 16. Struggling in school. Angry at you for reasons he probably can't articulate." Morrison's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. "You're barely holding it together, Daniel. 1 more year until he leaves for college, if he goes, and then what? You keep working night shifts until your back gives out? Keep living in that apartment that still has your dead wife's photos on the walls?" Daniel's hand moved before he could stop it. He grabbed Morrison by the collar and slammed him against the truck, hard enough to make the metal dent. "Don't," Daniel said quietly. "Talk about my wife." Morrison didn't fight back. He just smiled. "There it is. The thing you keep buried. The thing that makes you dangerous." He straightened his collar when Daniel released him. "Think about my offer. Because whether you take it or not, people are going to start asking questions about what happened in that trauma bay. And once they start digging, they're going to find things you don't want found." He dropped the business card on the ground and walked away. Daniel stood there for a long time, staring at the card lying in the oil-stained concrete. Then he got in his truck and drove home. The apartment was quiet. Evan's bedroom door was closed. He must have come back while Daniel was at work. Daniel considered knocking, trying to bridge the gap that had grown between them like a physical thing, something you could measure in feet and silence. Instead, he went to his own room, pulled the blackout curtains, and lay down on the bed without undressing. Sleep didn't come. His mind kept replaying the night. The patient's blue lips, Vance's face, Clara Hayes' questions, Morrison's smile. All of it circling back to the same point. He'd broken his own rule. He'd stopped being invisible. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We should talk." "Coffee?" "Clara." He deleted it. Another buzz, different number. "The hospital administrator wants to see you. 2 p.m. today." Vance. He stared at that one longer before setting the phone face down on the nightstand. Outside, the sun finished rising. Morning traffic started its familiar noise. Somewhere in the apartment, Evan's alarm went off and was immediately silenced. Daniel heard his son moving around, getting ready for school, the sound of cabinet doors, running water, footsteps that carefully avoided the squeaky floorboard outside Daniel's room. Daniel closed his eyes and tried to remember what Emily's voice sounded like when she laughed. The memory was getting harder to find, like someone had turned down the volume year by year until it was just static. His phone buzzed again. This time the text was from the hospital. "Admin meeting mandatory. Your employment status will be discussed." Daniel sat up. Through the closed door, he heard the apartment's front door open and close. Evan leaving for school without saying goodbye. The silence that followed was absolute. He picked up Morrison's business card from where he'd stuffed it in his pocket. The text was simple. Morrison Consulting. Discretion guaranteed. Daniel had spent 5 years trying to forget what he was capable of. 5 years building a small, quiet life that hurt less than remembering. 5 years telling himself that being invisible was the same thing as being safe, but safety was an illusion. He'd learned that the night Emily died, hooked up to machines in a hospital room while doctors explained that sometimes, even with insurance and specialists and every possible intervention, people just slipped away. He'd learned it again last night, watching residents freeze and protocols fail, and a man's life hang in the balance of a decision that wasn't supposed to be his to make. Maybe Morrison was right. Maybe staying invisible had been the wrong choice all along. Or maybe, and this thought was worse, maybe there was never a choice at all. Maybe he'd just been delaying the inevitable, and last night was simply the moment when everything he'd buried finally clawed its way back to the surface. His phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital's main number. Daniel let it go to voicemail, then listened to it immediately. "Mr. Cross, this is Barbara Chen from Human Resources. We need you to come in today at 2 p.m. for a meeting with hospital administration. This is regarding an incident that occurred during your shift last night. Attendance is mandatory. If you cannot make this time, please call back immediately to reschedule. Thank you." The message ended. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, holding the phone, and realized that somewhere in the last 12 hours, his invisible life had finally caught up with him. He had 3 hours to decide what to do about it. Daniel made eggs he didn't eat and coffee he barely tasted. He showered, dressed in clean clothes, and stood in the living room staring at the photos on the wall. The ones Morrison had mentioned. Emily at the beach. Emily holding newborn Evan. Emily laughing at something just outside the frame, her face bright with the kind of joy that seemed impossible now. He'd kept meaning to take them down. Put them in a box somewhere. Stop living in a shrine to a life that ended 5 years ago. But every time he tried, his hands wouldn't cooperate. At 1:30, he got in his truck and drove back to Memorial General. The parking lot looked different in daylight, less like a war zone, more like what it actually was. A place where people went when everything else had already gone wrong. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where administration lived in carpeted offices far away from the blood and noise of the ER. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a practiced smile, directed him to conference room B. Dr. Vance was already there. So was a man in his 50s wearing a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's truck, and a woman with steel gray hair and the kind of expression that suggested she'd perfected the art of firing people over lunch. "Mr. Cross, thank you for coming." The woman gestured to an empty chair. "I'm Linda Roth, Chief Operating Officer. You know Dr. Vance. This is Paul Henderson, our legal counsel." Daniel sat down. The lawyer didn't offer to shake hands. "Let's cut to the point," Roth continued. "Last night, you performed an emergency medical procedure in Trauma Bay 3 that falls significantly outside the scope of standard nursing practice. Dr. Vance has filed a report noting your actions, which saved the patient's life but also raised serious questions about your training and qualifications." "I was helping save a patient," Daniel said. "You were operating beyond your license," Henderson corrected. His voice was sharp, precise. New York state law is very clear about what registered nurses can and cannot do in emergency situations. What you did, taking control of a code, overriding the attending physician's orders, implementing a protocol that isn't found in any medical textbook we've been able to locate, that crosses multiple legal boundaries. Daniel looked at Vance. She met his eyes, but didn't say anything. Roth leaned forward. Here's the situation, Mr. Cross. We have a patient whose life you saved. His family is grateful. The media might even call you a hero if they get wind of this story. But we also have significant liability concerns. If we acknowledge that you operated outside your scope of practice, and we knew about it, or should have known about it, the hospital becomes vulnerable to lawsuits. So fire me, Daniel said. We're not firing you. Roth smiled, and Daniel instantly distrusted it. We're offering you an opportunity. Dr. Vance tells us you have military medical training, specialized training that clearly gives you capabilities beyond what we normally see in nursing staff. We'd like to know more about that training, document it, and potentially utilize it in a more official capacity. You want to exploit what I know? Henderson's face tightened. We want to understand your skill set and determine how it can be properly integrated into our hospital protocols, with appropriate documentation and oversight, of course. Of course, Daniel stood up. I appreciate the offer, but I'd like to keep my current position and continue doing my job the way I've been doing it for 3 years. That's not an option, Roth said quietly. Either you work with us to document and formalize your training, or we have no choice but to file this incident as a violation of hospital policy, which would mean suspension pending investigation, which would become part of your permanent record, which would make it very difficult to find nursing work anywhere else. The room went silent. Through the window, Daniel could see the hospital parking lot, the same view he'd been staring at for 3 years. He'd thought invisibility would protect him. He'd been wrong. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Until tomorrow, Roth said. Come back at the same time. We'll have paperwork ready either way. Daniel nodded and walked out. He made it as far as the lobby before Clara Hayes intercepted him. They're trying to box you in, she said without preamble. She was wearing jeans and a leather jacket, and she had a canvas bag slung over one shoulder that looked heavy with notebooks and equipment. I was upstairs doing a follow-up on my dad. Heard through the nursing station grapevine that you got called to admin. She fell into step beside him. What did they offer you? How is that your business? It became my business when I started asking questions about you. She pushed through the exit doors ahead of him, forcing him to either stop or follow. You were military. Special Operations Medical Unit. Except the unit doesn't officially exist, and your service records are so redacted they're basically blank pages with your name at the top. Daniel stopped walking. You need to let this go. Can't. Clara pulled out her phone, showed him a photo of her father in the ICU bed, tubes and wires everywhere but breathing on his own. That's my dad. Alive because you knew something that nobody else in that room knew. You're telling me I'm supposed to just shrug and move on? Yes. Well, tough. She pocketed the phone. I spent the morning doing research, found 3 other cases in the last 2 years where patients survived impossible scenarios in this hospital's ER. Different shifts, different attending physicians, but there's a pattern. Success rates that don't match the statistics. Recovery times that don't make medical sense. She looked at him. You're not the only one, are you? There are others like you scattered around the medical system, doing things they're not supposed to know how to do. Daniel's mind flashed to Morrison's words, 47 operators. You're going to get yourself in trouble, he said quietly. Probably. But I'm going to get the story first. Clara adjusted her bag. Look, I know you don't want to talk. I get it. You've got reasons for staying invisible. But whatever the hospital is planning, whatever they offered you in that meeting, you should know they've been covering up malpractice complaints for the last 18 months. 6 deaths, all ruled as standard complications. All families quietly paid off to avoid lawsuits. Daniel went very still. How do you know that? I told you. I'm good at finding stories. Claire's expression softened slightly. My dad almost became number 7. Maybe he would have if you hadn't been there. She pulled a business card from her pocket, her own this time. When you're ready to talk, call me, because I promise you, whatever happens next, you're going to need someone on your side who knows how to fight back. She walked away before Daniel could respond. He stood there in the parking lot holding two business cards now, Morrison's and Clara's, one offering money and discretion, one offering exposure and truth. He got in his truck and drove home, and for the first time in 5 years, he didn't go straight to bed. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a box from under the sink, the box he'd been avoiding since Emily died. Inside were the photos and documents from his time in the program, training manuals with pages of techniques that weren't supposed to exist, letters from other operators, a flash drive containing protocols that should have been destroyed, and at the bottom, sealed in a plastic bag, Emily's medical records from the hospital where she died. Daniel had read them once, the night after her funeral, and then sealed them away. But he pulled them out now, spreading the pages across the table, and started reading. He read about the delays in treatment, the misdiagnosed symptoms, the medication errors that cascaded into system failures. He read the attending physician's notes, and he saw the places where someone had gone back and changed the records, making the preventable look inevitable. The handwriting on those changes was distinctive, small, precise, with a particular loop on the capital B. Daniel pulled out his phone and searched the hospital staff directory. Found the name he was looking for, Dr. Barbara Weinstein, Chief of Cardiology, the same person whose signature appeared at the bottom of Emily's death certificate, the same person who now sat on Memorial General's medical review board, the same person who would be part of the decision about what happened to Daniel's career tomorrow at 2 p.m. His hands were shaking when he put the papers down, not with fear, with something else, something that had been sleeping inside him for 5 years, curled up behind the grief and exhaustion and practiced invisibility. Morrison had said Daniel was dangerous. He'd been wrong. Daniel had spent 5 years trying not to be dangerous, trying to be small and quiet and forgettable. But maybe dangerous was exactly what he needed to be. His phone buzzed. Another text from Evan. Staying at Josh's again. This time, Daniel called. It rang 4 times before his son picked up. What? Evan's voice was flat, annoyed. I need you to come home, Daniel said. We need to talk. I'm busy. Evan. Daniel took a breath. Please. It's important. Silence on the other end. Then, fine, but I can't stay long. That's okay. Just come home. He hung up and started putting Emily's records back in the box. But this time he left the box on the table where he could see it. Outside, the afternoon sun was burning through the clouds, making everything sharp and clear. Daniel sat at the table and waited for his son to come home, and thought about all the ways a person could stop being invisible. Evan showed up 40 minutes later, dropping his backpack by the door with the particular kind of heaviness that meant he resented being there. He was taller than Daniel now, had been for 6 months, with Emily's dark eyes and a permanent expression that suggested the world was disappointing him on purpose. So what's the emergency? Evan stayed near the door, arms crossed. Daniel gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down. I'd rather stand. Evan. What? The word came out sharp. You drag me back here, interrupt my afternoon, and now you want to have some kind of heart-to-heart? We don't do that, Dad. We haven't done that in years. Daniel felt the words land like small cuts, precise and accurate. I know. You know. Evan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Great. So this is the part where you apologize for basically checking out after Mom died? For working every shift you can find so you don't have to be home? For turning into this ghost who walks around like he's already half dead? That's exactly what you did. Evan's voice cracked slightly. You think I don't notice? You think I'm too stupid to see that you'd rather be anywhere else than in the same room as me? Daniel stood up, but Evan stepped back, maintaining the distance between them like a physical barrier. I'm not trying to get away from you, Daniel said quietly. I'm trying to keep us both alive. By working yourself to death, by never talking about Mom, by pretending like if we just don't mention her it didn't happen. Evan's hands were shaking now. I needed you. After she died, I needed you, and you just disappeared. You're still here, but you're not actually here. The truth of it hit Daniel in the chest. He'd known, on some level, that Evan was hurting, but knowing and hearing it said out loud were different things. You're right, Daniel said. You're right about all of it. Evan blinked, thrown off by the admission. What? I did check out. I did stop being present. I made you deal with losing your mother while I hid behind work and exhaustion and every other excuse I could find. Daniel moved to the table, picked up Emily's medical file. But I need you to understand something. I need you to know why. I don't want to hear, your mother didn't die because she was sick. Daniel opened the file, spread the pages out. She died because the doctors at Memorial General made mistakes. Multiple mistakes. And then they covered them up. Evan went very still. What are you talking about? Daniel pointed to the records, the changed handwriting, the timeline that didn't add up. He walked Evan through it methodically, the delayed diagnosis, the wrong medication dosage, the cascade of failures that should have been caught but weren't. And then the alterations in the file, the signatures that appeared days after her death, the way the narrative had been carefully reconstructed to make everything look inevitable. When he finished, Evan was sitting in the chair, face pale, staring at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. The hospital killed her, Evan said finally. And then they lied about it. Yes. And you've known this whole time. I found out the night of her funeral. I read the files, saw the changes, and Daniel's voice trailed off. I didn't know what to do with it. I was barely functioning. You were 13. I couldn't fall apart, couldn't start a legal fight, couldn't do anything except try to keep you fed and safe and in school. So I buried it. Took a job at the same hospital because we needed the insurance and the steady income. And I told myself that keeping you stable was more important than justice? Evan looked up at him. Then making them pay for what they did? Then destroying what was left of our lives trying to fight a system that was always going to win? Evan stood abruptly, knocking the chair back. That's bullshit. Evan, no. You want to talk about why I'm angry? This is why. You gave up. You just accepted it and moved on like Mom's life didn't matter enough to fight for. That's not what I did. Then what do you call it? Evan's voice was rising. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you let them get away with murder. And then you went to work for them every single day like nothing happened. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest. The careful control he'd been maintaining, the walls he'd built to keep functioning, all of it starting to splinter. I was trying to protect you, Daniel said. I was trying to give you a childhood that wasn't completely destroyed by... I didn't want protection. I wanted my dad. Evan grabbed his backpack. I wanted someone who would stand up and do something instead of just surviving. He headed for the door. Daniel caught his arm. Wait, there's more. I don't want to hear more. I can't. Evan pulled free, but he didn't leave. Just stood there with his hand on the doorknob, not turning around. Daniel took a breath. Something happened at work last night. I saved a patient using techniques I wasn't supposed to know. The hospital found out. They called me in today and they're threatening my job unless I cooperate with them. Document my training. Let them use what I know. So let them fire you. Who cares? I care. Because if I lose this job, I lose our insurance. I lose the steady paycheck. And I lose access to the system that killed your mother. Daniel moved closer. But if I cooperate, if I give them what they want, I might be able to get inside. Find out what else they've been covering up. Make sure what happened to Mom doesn't happen to anyone else. Evan turned around slowly. You want to take them down? I want to make them pay. But I need to do it smart. And I need... Daniel hesitated. I need you to understand why I'm doing this. Why I've been invisible for 5 years. Because once I stop hiding, everything is going to change. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. They stared at each other across the small apartment. Evan's expression was unreadable, cycling through anger and confusion and something that might have been fear. What do you need me to do? Evan asked finally. Stay out of trouble. Keep your head down at school. Don't talk to anyone about this. Daniel moved to the window, looked out at the street below. And if something happens to me, if things go wrong, there's a lawyer's name in the box under the sink. Her name is Michelle Torres. She has copies of everything. Promise me you'll call her. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me anyway. Evan's jaw tightened. Fine, I promise. He adjusted his backpack. Can I go now? Yeah. But Evan didn't move. Hey, Dad? Yeah? Don't get yourself killed trying to be some kind of hero. It's not worth it. Daniel turned around. She was your mother. It's worth it. Evan nodded once, quickly, like he was afraid if he acknowledged it too much, he'd start crying. Then he left, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Daniel stood alone in the apartment, surrounded by Emily's medical records and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. His phone buzzed, a text from Clara. "Still want to talk?" He typed back. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., coffee shop on Clark Street." Her response came immediately. "I'll be there." Daniel gathered the papers, put them back in the box, and shoved it under the sink. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and started making a list of everything he remembered from the program, every protocol, every technique, every piece of training that had been classified and buried and supposedly forgotten. By the time he finished, it was nearly midnight. The list covered 4 pages, front and back, in his neat handwriting. It represented 5 years of education that had been compressed into 18 months of the most intensive training the military had ever developed. Techniques that could restart a heart after 10 minutes of flatline. Procedures that could stop arterial bleeding with pressure points and timing. Methods that turned a field medic into something close to a surgeon, but faster and more adaptable. It was dangerous knowledge, the kind of knowledge that made people like Morrison see dollar signs, and people like the hospital administrators see opportunity. The kind of knowledge that got programs shut down and operators scattered to the winds with strict orders to forget everything they'd learned. Daniel folded the list and put it in his pocket. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., the hospital would expect an answer. He'd give them one, just not the one they were expecting. He couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., he gave up trying and went for a run through the empty streets, pushing his body until his lungs burned and his legs felt like lead. When he got back to the apartment, Evan's bedroom door was closed, but light showed underneath. Daniel almost knocked, almost tried to bridge the gap that had reopened between them. Instead, he showered and made coffee and watched the sun come up through the kitchen window. At 6:30, he left for the coffee shop. Clark Street was one of those neighborhoods that gentrified in waves, old brick buildings with new signs, coffee shops next to pawn shops. The kind of place where different versions of the city crashed into each other, and nobody was quite sure which one would win. Clara was already there, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open and 3 empty espresso cups lined up like soldiers. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "You look terrible," she said when Daniel sat down. "Thanks. I mean it as a compliment. People who look put together are usually lying about something." She closed the laptop. "So, are you ready to tell me the truth?" Daniel pulled out the list from his pocket, unfolded it, and slid it across the table. Clara's eyes scanned the first page, then widened slightly. "What is this?" "Proof that you were right. About me. About there being others." Daniel leaned back. "I was part of a military medical program that officially doesn't exist. They trained us to do things that aren't in textbooks. Gave us capabilities that made us very valuable and very illegal, depending on who you asked." Clara was reading now, really reading, her expression shifting from curiosity to something closer to awe. "These protocols, some of these are theoretically possible, but nobody's ever successfully implemented them outside laboratory conditions. We did, all of us, 47 operators across different units. Where are they now? Scattered. The program got shut down 5 years ago after an incident that was never made public. We were all discharged with strict orders to forget our training and never use it again. Most of us ended up in civilian healthcare, quiet jobs, places where we could disappear." Clara looked up. "What was the incident?" Daniel hesitated. This was the line he'd never crossed, the story he'd never told anyone except the investigators, who'd made it clear his career depended on his silence. "There was a forward operating base in Afghanistan," he said quietly. "Mass casualty event. 42 wounded soldiers coming in over the course of 3 hours. The field hospital was overwhelmed. They called in operators from my program to help." He stopped, his throat tightening. "We saved 38 of them. 4 died despite everything we tried. Those are good numbers. Exceptional numbers, actually. But the techniques we used to save them, the protocols, the procedures, they were captured on medical monitoring equipment. Someone leaked the data. News outlets started asking questions about what the military was doing that civilian hospitals couldn't replicate. Medical associations got involved. Insurance companies got nervous. And suddenly, the program that had saved 38 lives became a liability that needed to be erased. Clara sat back, processing. They shut you down for being too good at your jobs. They shut us down because we proved the current medical system was leaving people to die when they didn't have to. That's not a story anyone wanted to deal with. Daniel took the list back, folded it. So they scattered us, made us sign NDAs, threatened us with prosecution if we ever talked about what we knew, and most of us went along with it because we were tired and traumatized and we just wanted to stop fighting. But you kept using it. Last night, in that trauma bay, I broke protocol, first time in 5 years. Daniel's jaw tightened. And within 12 hours, I had my old commanding officer showing up in the parking lot and the hospital threatening my job. So yes, you were right. People are watching, and they're not happy. Clara pulled out a recording device, set it on the table. Can I record this? No. Daniel, not yet. He leaned forward. You said the hospital's been covering up malpractice. 6 deaths in 18 months. I need to know everything you found. Names, dates, how it connects. Clara studied him for a long moment, then put the recorder away and pulled out a worn notebook instead. She flipped through pages covered in tight handwriting and highlighted sections. It started about 2 years ago. Patient outcomes in the ER started declining. Not dramatically, but enough that if you knew what to look for, the pattern was there. Longer wait times, more complications, higher mortality rates for cases that should have been survivable. She traced her finger down a list of names. The first death was a woman named Patricia Gomez. 62. Came in with chest pain. Standard cardiac workup. She arrested during treatment, they couldn't get her back. Ruled as an MI, family accepted it. What made it suspicious? Her medical record showed she'd been given a medication she was allergic to. The allergy was documented in her chart. Someone either didn't check or didn't care. Clara flipped to another page. Second death, Michael Chen, 47. Diabetic emergency. Given the wrong insulin dosage, went into hypoglycemic shock, died 3 hours later. Again, family accepted the hospital's explanation. Daniel felt something cold settling in his stomach. The others? Clara read them off methodically. Each death was different, but the pattern was the same, preventable errors, covered up by documentation that made them look like unfortunate complications. The families were compensated quietly, NDAs were signed, and the hospital moved on. The thing is, Clara said, these weren't random mistakes. The errors all happened on specific shifts, with specific attending physicians. And in every single case, the medical review board signed off on the findings without any real investigation. Let me guess. Dr. Barbara Weinstein was on that review board. Clara's eyes narrowed. How did you know? Daniel pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of Emily's altered medical records. Because she signed off on my wife's death certificate, and her handwriting is on the changes made to these files after Emily died. Clara went very pale. Your wife died at Memorial General 5 years ago. Same pattern. Preventable errors, covered documentation, family too devastated to ask hard questions. Daniel's voice was flat, controlled. I've been working in the same hospital that killed her because I needed the job. But now I'm starting to think I've been in the perfect position to see what they're really doing. Clara was taking notes now, fast and efficient. Do you still have the original records before they were altered? No, they disappeared from the hospital system about 6 months after her death. All I have are the copies I pulled the night she died, and those show the changes but not what was originally written. That's still evidence of tampering. Clara looked up. Daniel, if we can prove a pattern of systematic cover-ups, if we can connect these deaths to deliberate negligence or fraud, this isn't just malpractice, this is potentially criminal, which is why they're going to fight like hell to stop us. So what's your plan? Daniel checked his watch. He had 6 hours until the hospital meeting. I'm going to give them what they want. I'm going to cooperate, document my training, play the grateful employee who's just happy to have a job. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to collect evidence. Find out how deep this goes and who else is involved. Clara shook her head. That's incredibly dangerous. If they suspect you're investigating them, they won't. Because I've spent 5 years being invisible. They think I'm broken and grateful and easy to control. Daniel stood up. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to keep digging into those deaths. Find the connections I can't see from inside. And if something happens to me, if I disappear or have an accident or suddenly resign, I need you to make sure this story gets told. Nothing's going to happen to you. That's what my son said. Daniel pulled out Morrison's business card, wrote a number on the back. This is my personal cell, not the number the hospital has. If you need to reach me, use this, and be careful who you talk to. Morrison, my old CO, he's got resources and connections. If he thinks you're getting too close to exposing the program, he'll shut you down. Clara took the card, studied it. You're trusting me with a lot. You're the one who started asking questions. That makes you either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Can it be both? Daniel almost smiled. Yeah, it probably is. He left her there with her laptop and her espresso cups and her pages of notes. Outside, the morning had turned gray and heavy, the kind of weather that made the city feel smaller and more claustrophobic. Daniel walked back to his truck, got in, and sat there for a moment, staring at the hospital's business district visible in the distance. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We're watching you, Daniel. Choose carefully. He deleted it and drove to the hospital. The ER was busy when Daniel arrived. He wasn't scheduled to work, but he knew the rhythms of the place well enough to predict when they'd be understaffed. Sure enough, Marcus Liu looked relieved when Daniel walked through the doors. Cross, thank God, we're drowning here. Can you take Bay 2? Standard chest pain workup. Daniel nodded and fell into the familiar routine. Vitals. History. EKG. The patient was a man in his 60s, overweight, scared. Daniel worked methodically, efficiently, invisible in the way he'd perfected over 3 years. But now he was seeing the department differently, noticing things he'd been too numb to register before. The way Dr. Weinstein walked through the ER like she owned it, barely glancing at the patients. The way certain nurses whispered when she passed, a mix of fear and resentment. The way medical records got flagged for review, but somehow never made it to the Quality Assurance Committee. Daniel finished with the chest pain patient, negative troponin, stress test scheduled for next week, sent home with follow-up instructions, and moved to the next case. And the next. Working his shift like he always did, but now every observation was data. Every conversation was potential evidence. At noon, Dr. Vance found him in the supply room. Cross, can we talk? He turned. What's up? She closed the door behind her, lowered her voice. I want you to know that report I filed wasn't meant to get you in trouble. I was trying to document what happened so there'd be a record of your actions, in case the patient's family decided to sue or something. It's fine. It's not fine. I should have talked to you first. Should have asked about your background before putting it in writing. Vance crossed her arms, defensive. Look, I know what they're trying to do. Admin wants to turn you into some kind of asset they can market. Memorial General, where even our nurses have special forces training, or whatever. It's gross. Then why help them? Because I'm a doctor at a hospital that's slowly drowning in bureaucracy and budget cuts, and administrators who care more about quarterly reports than patient outcomes. Vance's voice was tired. You saved that man's life. I want to know how. Not so I can exploit it, but so I can learn from it. So maybe next time I don't have to watch someone die because I was following protocol that wasn't working. Daniel studied her face. She looked sincere, but sincerity didn't mean much when careers were on the line. What do you want from me? He asked. I want you to teach me. Off the record. No documentation, no admin involvement. Just show me what you know. She met his eyes. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I'm good at it, but you're better, and I don't have enough ego to pretend otherwise. It was the first honest thing anyone at the hospital had said to him in 3 years. I'll think about it, Daniel said. Vance nodded and left. Daniel stayed in the supply room thinking about trust and leverage and how many ways this could go wrong. His phone buzzed. A text from Evan. You okay? He typed back, yeah. You? Still processing. Talk tonight. Daniel pocketed the phone and went back to work. At 1:45, he clocked out and headed up to administration. The same conference room, the same people. Roth and Henderson sitting across the table like judges at a trial. Mr. Cross. Roth gestured to the chair. Have you made a decision? Daniel sat down, pulled out the folded list from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. I'll cooperate, he said. Document my training, work with your protocols team. Whatever you need. But I have conditions. Henderson leaned forward. You're not in a position to negotiate. Actually, I am. Because if you fire me and I talk to the press about why, you're going to have a lot of uncomfortable questions to answer about how you hired someone with classified military training and never bothered to do a proper background check, about what that says regarding your hiring practices and oversight. Roth's expression didn't change. What are your conditions? I want a raise. 20%. Backdated to the start of this month. I want full health benefits extended to cover my son until he's 26, regardless of employment status. And I want a seat on the medical review board. The room went very quiet. That's not how the review board works, Roth said carefully. Those seats are appointed by department heads. Then appoint me. You want my training documented? You want me to be an asset for this hospital? Fine. But I'm not doing it without having a say in how patient care gets reviewed and how outcomes get reported. Henderson was scribbling notes. This is highly irregular. So is threatening to fire someone for saving a patient's life. Daniel kept his voice level. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Roth and Henderson exchanged a look. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind of conversation that happened in boardrooms and executive meetings, weighing risks and benefits and liability exposure. We'll need to discuss this with the executive board, Roth said finally. Come back on Monday. Same time. We'll have an answer then. Fine. Daniel stood up. But the documentation starts now. If I'm going to cooperate, I'm going to do it my way. No press releases, no marketing materials, no turning this into a publicity stunt. Understood? Roth nodded slowly. Understood. Daniel walked out before they could change their minds. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline and fear, and the particular terror that came from putting yourself on a collision course with people who had more power than you did. But he'd gotten what he needed. Access to the review board meant access to case files, to patterns, to the evidence that would prove what happened to Emily wasn't an isolated incident. He just had to stay alive long enough to use it. But he made it halfway across the parking lot before Morrison appeared again, stepping out from between two cars like he'd been waiting. That was quite a performance, Morrison said. Negotiating your way onto the medical review board. Bold move. How did you say it? I told you, I keep tabs. Morrison smiled. Though I have to admit I'm impressed. Most people would have taken the safe route, accepted the raise, kept their heads down, but not you. You're planning something. Daniel kept walking. Morrison fell into step beside him. Let me give you some advice, Morrison continued. Whatever you think you're going to accomplish by getting inside their system, it won't work. These hospitals, these administrators, they've been playing this game a lot longer than you have. They know how to protect themselves. Then why are you here? Because I don't want to see you get hurt. Despite what you might think, I actually respected you. You were one of the best operators in the program. Daniel stopped, turned to face him. If you respected me, you wouldn't have let them shut it down. You wouldn't have scattered us and threatened us and made us pretend like everything we learned was worthless. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Morrison's expression hardened. You think I wanted to end the program? You think I wanted to see 47 highly trained medics reduced to working night shifts in underfunded hospitals? I fought for you, all of you, and I lost. Because the people making decisions were more interested in protecting the status quo than in saving lives. So why keep tracking us? Why show up now? Because some of your fellow operators aren't as careful as you are. Because 3 of them have already disappeared, just vanished along with any record they were ever part of the program, and because whoever's cleaning up loose ends is getting closer to you. Daniel felt ice in his veins. Who? I don't know. That's the problem. Could be the military covering their tracks. Could be private contractors hired to eliminate potential liabilities. Could be the hospitals themselves, worried about what might come out if people like you start talking. Morrison pulled out another business card. My offer still stands. I can get you out. New identity, new city, enough money to start over somewhere they'll never find you. I have a son. Bring him. I can arrange everything. Daniel looked at the card, then at Morrison's face. For a moment he considered it. Running had worked for 5 years. It could work again. But then he thought about Emily's altered medical records. About the 6 families Clara had found, grieving loved ones who died because someone valued profit over care. about Evan's face when he'd asked why Daniel had given up. "No," Daniel said. "I'm not running anymore." "Then you're going to die trying to be a hero." "Maybe. But at least I'll die doing something that matters." Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, your choice. But when things go bad, and they will, don't say I didn't warn you." He walked away, leaving Daniel alone in the parking lot with another business card he wouldn't use. Daniel got in his truck and drove home. The afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds, turning everything sharp and golden. He thought about calling Evan, checking in, trying to rebuild the connection that had frayed over 5 years of grief and avoidance. Instead, he pulled out his phone and texted Clara. "Got access to the review board. Starting Monday. Need you to keep digging on your end." Her response came fast. "Already found 2 more cases. This goes deeper than we thought." Daniel stared at the message, then typed, "How deep?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Meet me tonight. 9 p.m., same place. You need to see this." He confirmed and pocketed the phone. Whatever Clara had found, it was big enough that she didn't want to discuss it over text. Daniel went inside, made dinner he barely tasted, and waited for the sun to go down. When Evan came home at 8, they sat at the kitchen table and talked, really talked, for the first time in months. Not about Emily, not yet, but about school, about Evan's friends, about the small details of daily life that Daniel had been too numb to notice. It wasn't healing, not even close, but it was a start. At 8:45, Daniel left for the coffee shop. The streets were quieter now, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. He parked 2 blocks away, approached on foot, checking for anyone who might be watching. Clara was in the same corner booth, but this time her laptop was closed and her expression was grim. "You're going to want to sit down for this," she said. Daniel sat. Clara pulled out a folder thick with printed documents and photographs. "I found the connection. The thing that links all 8 deaths, including your wife." 8? "I found 2 more cases. Same pattern, same cover-up, but that's not the worst part." She spread the documents out. Every single death happened after the hospital switched to a new medical record system. Digital platform, cloud-based, supposed to improve efficiency and reduce errors. "Let me guess. It made things worse. Not worse. Different." Clara pointed to a highlighted section in one of the reports. The system was designed by a company called Sentinel Medical Solutions. Private equity-backed, very well-connected politically. They sold it to hospitals as a way to streamline care and reduce liability. "How does a record system reduce liability?" Clara's expression was dark. "Because it includes predictive algorithms that flag high-risk patients. Patients who are likely to have complications, likely to sue, likely to cost the hospital more than they bring in. And in hospitals that are struggling financially, like Memorial General, those flags become justifications for cutting corners." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "They're triaging based on profit. Worse than that. The algorithms can be adjusted, settings changed, risk thresholds modified. And someone at Memorial General has been using those adjustments to deliberately target certain patients for substandard care." She pulled out another document. "Here's the proof. I hacked into the system, don't ask how, you don't want to know, and found the access logs. Someone's been modifying patient records, changing medication orders, altering treatment protocols, and they've been doing it under an administrative account that's supposed to be for system maintenance only." Daniel scanned the logs. The modifications were systematic, methodical, not random errors, but deliberate interventions designed to look like mistakes. "Who has access to that account?" he asked. Clara met his eyes. "Only 3 people. The hospital's chief information officer, the medical director, and Dr. Barbara Weinstein, chief of cardiology and head of the medical review board." Everything clicked into place. The cover-ups, the altered records, Emily's death, and the 6 others. All of it connected through a system that let someone kill patients remotely with plausible deniability built in. "We need to go to the police," Daniel said. "With what? Hacked access logs that I obtained illegally? They'll throw it out before we finish explaining." Clara gathered the documents. "We need more. Direct evidence. Something that proves intent, not just opportunity." "And you think I can get that from the review board?" "I think you're going to be in the room where it happens." where they discuss cases and make decisions about what gets investigated and what gets buried. Clara looked at him seriously. But Daniel, if they figure out what you're doing, if they realize you're not just cooperating but actively investigating them, they will eliminate the threat. And they've already proven they know how to make people disappear. Daniel thought about Morrison's warning. 3 operators already gone. The hospital's willingness to destroy evidence, the systematic nature of the cover-ups. Then I'll have to be very careful, he said. Clara nodded slowly. We both will. They sat there in the coffee shop, surrounded by documents that proved murder and conspiracy and systemic corruption, and made a plan that would probably get them both killed. But for the first time in 5 years, Daniel felt like he was moving towards something instead of just running away. Daniel spent the weekend teaching himself to lie better. He practiced in the mirror, refining the expression of grateful compliance, the posture of someone who'd been beaten down and accepted it. By Sunday night, he almost believed his own performance. Evan caught him at it around 11, standing in the bathroom with his hands braced against the sink, staring at his reflection like it belonged to someone else. You look insane, Evan said from the doorway. Daniel didn't turn around. Probably am. Is this about tomorrow? The hospital thing? Yeah. Evan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed in that way he'd inherited from Emily. Defensive, but not entirely closed off. You don't have to do this. We could leave, go somewhere else. I could finish school online or whatever. We're not running. Why not? Morrison offered to help, didn't he? New city, new start. That doesn't sound terrible. Daniel finally looked at his son. You trust Morrison? I don't know him. Exactly. And the people you don't know are usually the ones who hurt you worst. Daniel dried his hands on a towel that had seen better days. Besides, running doesn't fix anything, just moves the problem to a different zip code. So instead you're going to walk into a hospital full of people who might want you dead and pretend to cooperate while secretly investigating them. Evan's voice was flat. That's not fixing things either. That's just suicide with extra steps. It's calculated risk. It's stupid. They stared at each other across the small bathroom. Daniel saw Emily and Evan's face, the stubborn set of his jaw, the way his eyes went dark when he was scared but trying not to show it. I need you to trust me, Daniel said quietly. I know I haven't given you much reason to, but I'm asking anyway. Evan's expression flickered, anger, fear, something that might have been hope. If you die doing this, I'm going to be so pissed at you. Fair enough. I mean it. I'll find a way to bring you back just so I can kill you again myself. Daniel almost smiled. Deal. Evan pushed off the doorframe. I'm going to Josh's tomorrow after school, probably staying over. That way, if you need to do something dangerous or stupid, you won't have to worry about me being home. Evan, don't. His voice cracked slightly. Just don't die, okay? That's all I'm asking. Don't be a hero. Don't sacrifice yourself. Just come home. He left before Daniel could respond. A minute later, his bedroom door closed with a soft click that felt heavier than a slam. Daniel stood alone in the bathroom, looking at his reflection, and wondered if there was any version of this that ended with him coming home. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Daniel, dressed in his newest scrubs, still faded but less obviously worn, and drove to the hospital an hour early. The ER was quiet, just the overnight staff finishing their shift. He avoided everyone, went straight to the locker room, and reviewed the documents Clara had given him one more time before locking them in his locker behind a pile of old textbooks nobody would think to search. At exactly 2 p.m., he walked into the administrative wing. Same conference room, same people, but this time there was a fourth person at the table, a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that calculated your worth before you finished sitting down. Mr. Cross, Roth began, this is Dr. Margaret Chen, our medical director. She'll be overseeing the integration of your training into our protocols. Dr. Chen didn't offer to shake hands. I've reviewed your service record. What little of it isn't redacted anyway. Impressive credentials for someone who's been emptying bedpans for 3 years. Daniel kept his expression neutral. I was following orders to maintain a low profile. And now you're ready to come out of hiding? She tilted her head. Why the change of heart? Because a patient would have died if I hadn't intervened. Seemed like a waste to keep hiding skills that could save lives. Noble. The word dripped with skepticism. Let's cut the bullshit, Mr. Cross. You're here because you negotiated your way into a better position. That's fine. We're all adults. But let's be clear about expectations. You'll document your training, you'll teach select staff your techniques under controlled conditions, and you'll do it without drawing attention to this hospital or creating liability issues. In exchange, you get your raise, your benefits, and your seat on the medical review board. That was the agreement. Good. Dr. Chen slid a thick folder across the table. This is your contract. Standard employment agreement with additional clauses regarding confidentiality and intellectual property. Any techniques you teach us become hospital property. Any publications or public discussions require prior approval from administration. And if you violate these terms, we own the right to pursue legal action for damages. Daniel scanned the contract. The language was dense, deliberately obscure, but the message was clear. They were buying his silence along with his skills. I'll need a lawyer to review this, he said. Of course, you have until Friday to sign, but understand, your seat on the review board is contingent on signing. No contract, no access. Daniel nodded slowly. When's the first board meeting? Thursday, 6 p.m., conference room D. Dr. Chen stood up, clearly done with the conversation. Don't be late. And Mr. Cross? We're taking a considerable risk bringing you into our decision-making process. Don't make us regret it. She left. Roth and Henderson remained, watching Daniel with expressions that suggested they were waiting for him to make a mistake. Any questions? Roth asked. Just one. Who else knows about my background? About the military training? At this point? Just the people in this room and Dr. Weinstein, since she'll be working with you on the review board. Roth's smile was thin. We're keeping this very quiet, for everyone's protection. Of course. Daniel took the contract and stood. I'll have my answer by Friday. He walked out before they could see his hands shaking. No. The lawyer Clara had recommended was named Michelle Torres, and her office was in a converted brownstone that smelled like old books and ambition. She read the contract in silence while Daniel sat across from her, watching traffic through the window. Well, Torres said finally, this is one of the most aggressively predatory employment contracts I've seen in 15 years of practice. Congratulations. Can you fix it? Fix it? No. The hospital holds all the leverage here, but I can identify the pressure points, the places where they're overreaching, and we might be able to push back. She flipped through pages covered in highlighter. This intellectual property clause is legally questionable. They can't claim ownership of knowledge you acquired before employment, and this confidentiality section is so broad it might not hold up if challenged. What about the review board access? Torres looked up, eyes sharp. Why do you care about sitting on a medical review board? That's not typically something nurses fight for. Daniel met her gaze. Let's just say I have reasons to want insight into how patient deaths get investigated. Personal reasons? Very personal. Torres studied him for a long moment, then closed the contract. All right, here's my advice. Sign it. Accept the terms. Get your access. But document everything. Every meeting, every decision, every conversation that seems even slightly off. Because this contract gives them power, but it also creates a paper trail. And paper trails work both ways. You're telling me to cooperate while building a case against them. I'm telling you that if you're going to walk into a fight, bring ammunition. She pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. This is my cell. Call me if things get complicated, day or night. And Mr. Cross, whatever you're planning to do with that review board access, be very careful. Hospitals don't give up power without a reason, which means they think they can control you. They're wrong. Torres smiled slightly. Let's hope you're right. Daniel signed the contract Wednesday morning and delivered it to Human Resources himself. The woman behind the desk processed it with bureaucratic efficiency, stamped it, filed it, and handed him a new ID badge. You're all set, Mr. Cross. Welcome to your expanded role at Memorial General. The badge felt heavier than it should have, like a collar disguised as an upgrade. He spent the rest of the day working a regular shift in the ER, moving through the familiar routines while his mind cataloged everything differently now. He watched Dr. Weinstein make rounds, noting which patients she barely glanced at and which ones got her full attention. He listened to the conversations between administrators who thought nurses were invisible. He paid attention to which files got flagged for review and which ones disappeared into the system without comment. By the time his shift ended, he had a mental list of 12 incidents that warranted further investigation. 12 cases where outcomes didn't match the documented care. 12 families who might not know their loved ones had been killed by a system designed to protect profit over people. Clara texted him at 5 p.m. "Ready for tomorrow?" He replied, "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, you're there to observe and document. Don't push too hard too fast. They need to believe you're compliant." "I know. Do you? Because from what I've seen, you're not great at playing the long game." Daniel stared at the message. She wasn't wrong. He'd spent 5 years surviving, not strategizing. The idea of sitting in a room with the people responsible for Emily's death and pretending to cooperate made his jaw ache from clenching. But Clara was right. Rush this, and he'd get himself killed before collecting any real evidence. He texted back, "I'll be careful. Good. I'll be monitoring the hospital's network during the meeting. If anything weird shows up in the system logs, I'll let you know." Daniel pocketed his phone and headed home. Evan had already left for Josh's house. A note on the kitchen counter confirmed it, along with a promise to text if he was staying another night. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty, too much like a space where ghosts lived instead of people. Daniel made dinner he didn't eat, reviewed his notes one more time, and tried to sleep. Around 3 a.m., he gave up and went for a run through the dark streets, pushing his body until the noise in his head finally quieted enough to think clearly. He had one shot at this. One meeting to establish himself as someone harmless, someone grateful for the opportunity, someone who'd forgotten how to fight back. By the time the sun came up, he'd perfected the performance. Thursday crawled by with excruciating slowness. Daniel worked his regular shift, fielding the usual parade of broken bones and chest pains and people who thought a cold needed emergency attention. He smiled when appropriate, nodded when expected, and counted down the hours until 6 p.m. At 5:45, he changed into clean scrubs and headed to Conference Room D. It was larger than the other meeting rooms, with a long table that could seat 20 people. Currently, only 6 chairs were occupied. Dr. Weinstein sat at the head of the table, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of someone who enjoyed power. To her right was Dr. Chen, the medical director. To her left, 2 other physicians Daniel recognized but had never spoken to, Dr. Raymond Park from surgery and Dr. Lisa Hernandez from internal medicine. Across from them sat Paul Henderson, the hospital's lawyer, and an older man Daniel didn't recognize. "Mr. Cross." Dr. Weinstein looked up, smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome. Please, sit." Daniel took the empty chair at the far end of the table. The positioning was deliberate, close enough to participate, far enough to remind him he was the lowest-ranking person in the room. "Let me introduce everyone," Weinstein continued. "You know Dr. Chen and Mr. Henderson. This is Dr. Park, Dr. Hernandez, and Mr. Robert Klein, our Chief Information Officer." She gestured to each in turn. "We're a small board by design, keeps things efficient." "Efficient," Daniel repeated neutrally. "Indeed. Now, tonight's agenda focuses on several cases from the past month that require review. Standard procedure: we evaluate outcomes, determine if protocols were followed, and decide whether any actions warrant further investigation." Weinstein pulled up a file on the laptop in front of her. First case: Patricia Morales, 54, admitted with respiratory distress. Died 36 hours after admission. Initial review suggests complications from pneumonia, but the family has requested a second look. Dr. Park leaned forward. "I reviewed the file yesterday. Everything appears standard. She was high risk, diabetes, hypertension, history of smoking. The outcome, while unfortunate, was within expected parameters." "Agreed," Dr. Hernandez added. "The attending physician followed protocol. No indication of negligence." Weinstein looked at Daniel. "Mr. Cross, you're new to this process. Do you have any questions about how we evaluate cases?" Daniel forced himself to speak carefully. "Just trying to understand the criteria. When you say within expected parameters, what does that mean exactly?" "It means statistically, a patient with her risk factors had a significant probability of poor outcomes regardless of intervention," Dr. Chen explained. We can't save everyone, Mr. Cross. Sometimes the best medicine still isn't enough. Daniel nodded, keeping his expression thoughtful rather than skeptical. That makes sense, but how do we differentiate between couldn't be saved and mistakes were made? The room went very quiet. Henderson's pen stopped moving. Weinstein's smile froze in place. We examine the medical record, Weinstein said slowly. We look for deviations from protocol, errors in judgment, failures in communication. If those elements are present and contributed to the outcome, we investigate. If not, we rule it as an unfortunate but unavoidable result. And who determines what counts as a deviation? We do. This board. Weinstein's tone had shifted just slightly. Less welcoming, more warning. Based on our collective expertise and understanding of medical standards. Daniel nodded again, backing off. I appreciate the clarification. I'm just trying to learn the process. The temperature in the room warmed fractionally. Henderson resumed taking notes. Dr. Park cleared his throat and moved on to discussing the case details. Medications administered, vital sign trends, interventions attempted. It all sounded reasonable, documented, defensible. But Daniel was reading between the lines now. Patricia Morales had been flagged as high risk by the system. And high-risk patients, according to Clara's research, were the ones who got deprioritized when resources were tight. The board voted unanimously to close the case without further investigation. They moved through 3 more cases over the next hour. Each followed the same pattern: initial presentation, discussion of protocols, evaluation of outcomes, decision to close. The doctor spoke in careful language, hedging every statement with qualifiers and statistical probabilities. Henderson documented everything with legal precision. And Klein, the CIO, sat quietly in the corner, occasionally checking his phone but mostly just observing. Daniel played his role perfectly, asking just enough questions to seem engaged, but not so many that he appeared suspicious, nodding at appropriate moments, agreeing when consensus formed, the grateful employee learning from his betters. By 7:30, they'd reviewed 6 cases. Weinstein was closing her laptop when Klein finally spoke up. Actually, there's one more case I think we should discuss. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. It's not on the official agenda, but it came up during a routine audit of our medical records system. Weinstein's expression tightened. What case? Klein pulled out a tablet, tapped a few times. Emily Cross. Died 5 years ago. Cardiac arrest during treatment for what was initially diagnosed as acute coronary syndrome. The reason it flagged is because someone accessed her records last week using an administrative account, multiple times, outside normal business hours. The room temperature dropped 20 degrees. Daniel kept his face absolutely neutral, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. Why would that case flag? Dr. Hernandez asked. 5 years is well outside our standard review period. True, but the system is designed to alert us when old files get accessed repeatedly, especially by admin accounts. It's a security feature to prevent tampering. Klein looked directly at Daniel. The thing is, Emily Cross was your wife, wasn't she, Mr. Cross? Every eye in the room turned to him. Daniel met Klein's gaze steadily. She was, he said quietly. And did you access her medical records last week? No, I reviewed them 5 years ago after her death. I haven't touched them since. So you wouldn't know anything about why someone would be looking at her file now? Daniel felt the trap closing. If he said yes, he admitted to having knowledge he shouldn't have. If he said no, they'd assume he was lying and start digging deeper into his activities. He chose a third option. Is there a problem with her case? Daniel kept his voice level, curious rather than defensive. If someone's reviewing it, maybe they found something that was missed the first time. Weinstein leaned forward. Mr. Cross, I personally signed off on your wife's death certificate. I can assure you nothing was missed. She received excellent care. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, patients don't survive. I'm sure that's true. Daniel forced himself to hold her gaze. But if the system flagged her file for review, doesn't that mean we should look at it? Isn't that what this board is for? The silence that followed was absolute. Henderson cleared his throat. Mr. Cross raises a valid point. If the system generated an alert, we should at least examine why. The alert was triggered by unauthorized access, Klein said carefully, not by any medical concern. Still, Dr. Park interjected, If we're going to maintain consistency in our review process, we should probably look at any case that gets flagged, even old ones. Weinstein's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Fine. Mr. Klein, please forward the file to the board members. We'll review it next meeting. She looked at Daniel. And Mr. Cross, I'm sure you understand that you'll need to recuse yourself from any discussion of your wife's case. Conflict of interest. Of course, Daniel said. The meeting adjourned 5 minutes later. Daniel left quickly, avoiding conversation, heading straight for the parking lot. His hands were shaking again, but this time with something that felt like victory. They'd shown their hand. By bringing up Emily's file, by trying to intimidate him, they'd confirmed that Clara was right. Someone was actively monitoring access to those records, which meant someone was worried about what they might reveal. His phone buzzed the moment he got in his truck. Clara, just watch someone try to delete the access logs for Emily's file from the system. I caught it in real time and made a copy before they could finish. We've got them. Daniel typed back, Not yet, but we're getting close. He drove home through the dark city streets, mind racing through the implications. They tried to erase the evidence of someone accessing Emily's file, which meant the records contained something worth hiding, which meant Clara's theory about systematic cover-ups was more than just theory. The apartment was still empty when he arrived. Evan had texted earlier saying he'd stay at Josh's through the weekend. Daniel was grateful for it. He needed time to think, to plan, to figure out the next move without worrying about putting his son in danger. He pulled out his laptop and opened the encrypted files Clara had sent him. Started cross-referencing the cases they'd reviewed tonight with the patient data she'd compiled, looking for patterns, connections, anything that would prove the board wasn't just evaluating cases, but actively protecting the hospital from liability. It took him 3 hours, but he found it. Patricia Morales, the first case they'd reviewed, had been flagged as high risk by the Sentinel Medical Solutions system 3 days before her death. Her insurance status had been listed as complicated, code for someone whose coverage was about to expire, and her treatment had been modified by an administrative account at 2 a.m. on the night she died, changing her medication dosage just enough to cause respiratory complications. The same pattern appeared in 2 other cases from tonight's meeting. Someone was using the medical records system to kill patients who were considered financial liabilities. And the review board existed to make sure those deaths never got investigated too closely. Daniel sat back from his laptop, the weight of it settling into his chest like concrete. He'd known it was bad. But this was systematic murder. Organized, deliberate, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and medical jargon and plausible deniability. His phone rang. Morrison's number. Daniel almost didn't answer. Then he remembered the 3 missing operators and picked up. You need to get out, Morrison said without preamble. Tonight. Don't pack, don't make plans. Just get in your truck and drive. What happened? I just got word from one of my sources. Your name came up in a conversation it shouldn't have. The people cleaning up loose ends know you're investigating. They know about the journalist, and they're planning to eliminate both of you before you can expose anything. Daniel's blood went cold. How much time do I have? I don't know. Could be hours, could be days, but Cross, I'm serious. These people don't mess around. They've made 4 operators disappear already. You're next on the list. 4? I thought you said 3. Morrison's pause was heavy. The 4th one was confirmed this morning. Found dead in his apartment. Ruled as suicide, but I saw the photos. It wasn't suicide. Daniel closed his eyes, thinking about Evan at Josh's house, about Clara digging through hospital networks, about all the ways this could go wrong. I can't run, he said. Not yet. I'm too close. Then you're going to die trying to be a hero. You said that already. I'm saying it again because you're not listening. Morrison's voice was urgent now, stripped of his usual calculated calm. I trained you. I know what you're capable of. But you're one person against an entire system that's willing to kill to protect itself. That's not courage, Daniel. That's suicide. Maybe, but at least 8 families deserve to know the truth about how their loved ones died. 9, if you count Emily. Your wife wouldn't want you to die for this. No, but she'd understand why I'm doing it anyway. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. All right, your choice. But when they come for you, and they will, don't say I didn't warn you. He hung up. Daniel sat in the silent apartment, surrounded by evidence of murder and corruption and systematic abuse of power, and made a decision. He called Clara. "We need to move up the timeline," he said when she answered. "They know we're investigating. We've got maybe 48 hours before they shut us down permanently." "How do you know?" "Morrison just called. Said I'm on a kill list along with you." Clara swore softly. Okay. We can work with that. I've got enough evidence to publish something. Maybe not everything, but enough to start asking questions publicly." "No. If you publish now, they'll claim it's unverified conspiracy theories. We need something that can't be dismissed. Something that forces an official investigation." "Like what?" Daniel thought about the review board, the access he'd gained, the files he could now legally view as part of his position. Like documented proof that the medical review board is actively covering up malpractice, with dates, names, and evidence of tampering. "You can get that?" "I'm going to try. But Clara, if something happens to me, if I disappear or die or suddenly stop responding, you need to publish everything immediately. Don't wait for perfect. Just get it out there." "Don't talk like that. I'm being realistic. We're going up against people who've already killed at least 9 patients and 4 military operators. They're not going to stop at 10. Clara took a shaky breath. "Be careful, please." "I will. But you need to be careful too. Morrison said they know about you, which means you're in as much danger as I am." "I'll be fine. I've got backup copies of everything stored in 3 different locations. If they come after me, it all goes public automatically." "Good." Daniel checked his watch. Nearly midnight. "I'm going back to the hospital tomorrow. Going to see if I can access the full case files from tonight's meeting. If I can prove the board is deliberately closing cases that should be investigated, we've got them." "That's incredibly risky." "Everything about this is risky. Might as well get something out of it." They said goodbye and Daniel hung up. He should sleep. He'd need to be sharp tomorrow. But his mind was too wired, too full of variables and possibilities, and the particular kind of fear that came from knowing you'd painted a target on your own back. Around 2 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Evan, staying at Josh's through Monday. His parents are cool with it. "You okay?" Daniel stared at the message, weighing honesty against protection. Finally typed, "I'm okay. Be safe." "You too, Dad." The words sat there on the screen, simple and weighted with everything they weren't saying. Daniel closed his eyes and let himself imagine a version of this where he survived, where he and Evan rebuilt something real, where Emily's death meant something more than just another statistic in a system that valued profit over people. Then he opened his eyes and got back to work. He spent the rest of the night reviewing Clara's files, memorizing names and dates and patterns, building a mental map of the evidence they'd collected and the evidence they still needed, identifying weak points in the hospital's defenses and calculating how much risk he could take before they decided he was too dangerous to let live. By the time the sun came up, he had a plan. It was risky, probably stupid, and would likely get him killed if anything went wrong. But it was the only plan he had. Friday morning, Daniel went to the hospital early. The ER was quiet, the lull between night shift emergencies and daytime routine. He clocked in, grabbed coffee from the break room, and headed to the administrative wing before anyone could question what he was doing there. His new badge got him through the locked door to medical records. The room was empty this early, just rows of filing cabinets and computer terminals humming in the fluorescent light. Daniel logged in with his review board credentials, pulled up the cases from Thursday's meeting, and started downloading files to an encrypted thumb drive. He'd made it through 3 cases when someone cleared their throat behind him. Daniel turned slowly. Dr. Weinstein stood in the doorway, dressed for a morning shift, coffee in hand, watching him with an expression that suggested she'd been expecting this. "Mr. Cross?" she said quietly. "Working early today?" "Just reviewing the cases from last night, trying to understand the process better." "By downloading patient files to an external drive?" Daniel's hand froze on the keyboard. "I'm on the review board. I have access to these files." "You have access to review them in the system, not to copy them to personal storage devices." Weinstein stepped into the room, closed the door behind her. "That's a HIPAA violation, Mr. Cross. Grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges." You were just collecting evidence to support whatever theory you've developed about this hospital." Weinstein's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Let me save you some time. Yes, we make difficult decisions about resource allocation. Yes, some patients don't receive the level of care we'd like to provide. Yes, the Medical Review Board exists to protect the hospital from liability as much as it exists to ensure quality care. None of that is illegal. None of it is even unusual. That's how modern healthcare works. You altered my wife's medical records. I ensured her records accurately reflected the care she received and the inevitability of her outcome. You changed the timeline, the medication dosages, the documentation of symptoms. Weinstein set her coffee down on the nearest desk. Your wife was dying, Mr. Cross. She had undiagnosed cardiomyopathy that would have killed her regardless of what we did. The modifications I made to her file were to clarify details that were initially recorded incorrectly during the crisis of her code. That's not a cover-up, that's proper documentation. Bullshit. Careful. Weinstein's expression hardened. You're making serious accusations against a physician with 30 years of impeccable service. Accusations based on grief and conspiracy theories, and a journalist who's been fishing for a story she can't prove. Daniel stood up slowly, putting himself between Weinstein and the computer. Clara has proof. Access logs, modification timestamps, evidence that someone's been using the medical record system to target high-risk patients. Does she? Because I'm fairly certain any evidence she has was obtained through illegal hacking, which means it's inadmissible in any legal proceeding, which means you have nothing but theories and grief-fueled paranoia. The families deserve to know the truth. The families received closure and compensation. What you're proposing is to tear open old wounds for the sake of your own vindication. Weinstein moved closer, her voice dropping. I liked your wife, Mr. Cross. Emily was a kind woman who deserved better than the hand she was dealt, but nothing you do now will bring her back. And destroying this hospital, ruining careers, causing pain to grieving families, that won't make you feel better. It'll just make you the villain in a story that ends badly for everyone involved. But Daniel felt something crack inside his chest, not breaking, but shifting, like a bone setting after being misaligned for years. You're wrong, he said quietly. This isn't about making me feel better. It's about making sure you can't do this to anyone else. Weinstein studied his face for a long moment. You're not going to back down, are you? No. Then you're a fool. She picked up her coffee. The thumb drive, Mr. Cross. Hand it over, or I call security and have you arrested for HIPAA violations right now. Daniel looked at the drive still plugged into the computer, looked at Weinstein's calm, certain expression, looked at the door behind her and calculated his chances of getting past her before security arrived. Then he reached for the drive, pulled it free, and held it out. Weinstein took it, examined it briefly, and slipped it into her pocket. Smart choice. Now I'm going to walk you out of this building. You're going to go home, think very carefully about whether you want to keep your nursing license, and then you're going to decide to let this go. Understood? Understood, Daniel said. They walked out together, Weinstein leading, Daniel following, through the administrative wing and down to the main lobby. Early morning staff were arriving, yawning over coffee, complaining about traffic. Normal people doing normal work in a building that hid murder behind paperwork. At the front entrance, Weinstein stopped. I genuinely hope you make the right decision, Mr. Cross. For your sake and your son's. Because if you continue down this path, you won't just lose your job, you'll lose everything. She walked away. Daniel stood in the lobby for a long moment, feeling the weight of defeat settling into his shoulders. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Clara. She took the bait. Check your email. Clara's response came 30 seconds later. Got it. Perfect quality. You're a genius. Daniel smiled slightly and walked out into the cold morning air. The thumb drive he'd given Weinstein was blank, a decoy he'd prepared last night in case he got caught. The real files had been uploading to Clara's secure server from the moment he'd plugged in his laptop, routing through a VPN that made the traffic look like routine system maintenance. Weinstein thought she'd stopped him, but she'd just confirmed everything they needed to know. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. Daniel drove home with his hand steady on the wheel but his mind running calculations. Weinstein would check that thumb drive within the hour. She'd find it empty and realize she'd been played. After that, things would accelerate fast. He had maybe 6 hours before they made their move. 6 hours to get Evan somewhere safe and disappear himself before whoever was cleaning up loose ends came looking. His phone rang. Clara. I've got everything, she said, her voice tight with adrenaline. Patient files, modification logs, access records showing Weinstein and Klein both made changes to records after deaths were reported. It's all here. How fast can you get it published? That's the problem. I can't just dump this online. It needs to go through editors, legal review, fact checkers. Even if I rush it, we're looking at 48 hours minimum. We don't have 48 hours. I know, but if I publish without proper verification, they'll discredit the whole story. Call it fake news, conspiracy theory, whatever. We need institutional backing or this dies before it starts. Daniel pulled into his apartment complex, parked in the back where his truck wasn't visible from the street. What about law enforcement? FBI, State Attorney General, someone with authority to investigate? I've got contacts at the State AG's office. But again, they'll want verification before opening an investigation. And the hospital's lawyers will fight discovery every step of the way. Clara paused. We need something undeniable, something they can't dismiss or delay. Like what? Like a confession, or someone on the inside willing to testify. Daniel thought about Dr. Vance, the way she'd looked at him in the supply room, admitting she wanted to learn because protocols weren't working. Thought about Marcus Liu and the other nurses who'd worked under Weinstein for years, watching her make decisions they couldn't question. I might know someone, he said, but I need time to convince them, and time is the one thing we don't have. Then we make time. I'll reach out to my contacts, start laying groundwork for the story. You work your angle, but Daniel, whatever you do, don't go back to that hospital. They know you're a threat now. The moment you walk through those doors, you're giving them an opportunity to eliminate you. Understood. He hung up and sat in the truck, watching the apartment building's entrance, looking for cars that didn't belong or faces that seemed too interested in his movements. Nothing obvious. But that didn't mean they weren't watching. Inside the apartment, Daniel pulled out his laptop and started making copies of everything. Multiple thumb drives, multiple cloud accounts, physical printouts that he sealed in waterproof bags. Clara had backups, but redundancy had kept him alive in the military. It would keep him alive now. His phone buzzed. Morrison. You have maybe 3 hours before they move on you. Get out. Now. Daniel stared at the message, then typed, How do you know? Because I'm watching the same networks they are. And I just saw an encrypted communication between the hospital's security chief and a contractor who specializes in making problems disappear. You're the problem, Cross. Don't be stupid about this. Daniel's hands went cold. What about Clara Hayes? Is she on the list? The response took longer this time. Yes. Both of you. Tonight. Can you help her? I can try, but you need to move first. If you're dead, there's no story to protect. Daniel closed his eyes, thinking through options that kept getting narrower. He texted Clara. Morrison says they're coming tonight. You need to get somewhere public. Police station, news station, somewhere with witnesses and cameras. Her reply was immediate. Already ahead of you. I'm at the state AG's office right now. Dropped everything on a prosecutor's desk and told them I'm not leaving until they guarantee protective custody. Smart. Survival instinct. What about you? Working on it. He grabbed 2 of the thumb drives and the printed documents, stuffed them in a backpack along with his laptop, and headed for the door. Stopped. Went back and pulled out the box from under the sink. Emily's original medical files, the notes from the program, everything he'd been keeping as evidence or penance, or both. He was halfway to his truck when a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. 2 men inside, both wearing suits that screamed federal or private security. They spotted Daniel and the passenger door opened. Daniel didn't run. Running would confirm he was guilty of something worth chasing. Instead, he walked toward his truck like he had every right to be there, keys already in hand. Mr. Cross. The man from the sedan was in his 40s, built like someone who stayed in shape professionally. We need you to come with us. Who's we? Private security contracted by Memorial General. Hospital administration has some concerns about your recent activities. They'd like to discuss them in a more formal setting. Daniel kept his hand on the truck door. I'll schedule an appointment through HR. That's not really an option. The second man had exited the vehicle now, moving to flank Daniel's position. You can come voluntarily or we can make this difficult. Your choice. Am I under arrest? Not yet, but if you resist, we'll call the police and let them handle it. I'm sure they'd be very interested in hearing about HIPAA violations and theft of hospital property. Daniel's mind raced. They couldn't legally detain him without cause, but they could make enough noise to bring police, and once that happened, he'd be stuck in bureaucracy while they cleaned up whatever evidence he'd already exposed. He needed a different play. "All right," Daniel said, raising his hand slightly. "Let's talk. But not at the hospital. Neutral ground." The first man smiled. "That's not how this works." "Actually, it is. Because if you force me into your vehicle, that's kidnapping. And I'm guessing your contract with Memorial General doesn't cover felony charges." Daniel pulled out his phone, held it up. "I'm recording this conversation. I've also got a lawyer on speed dial who specializes in whistleblower protection. You want to gamble your freedom on whether your bosses will back you up when this goes south?" The two men exchanged glances. The second one pulled out his phone, stepped away to make a call. Daniel stood by his truck, phone still recording, praying he was reading this correctly. After a tense minute, the second man came back. "Change of plans. You've got 24 hours to present yourself at the hospital's legal department. If you don't show, we file criminal charges for theft and HIPAA violations. Clear?" "Crystal." They got back in their sedan and drove away. Daniel waited until they were gone, then got in his truck and drove in the opposite direction, taking a random route through side streets to make sure he wasn't being followed. He ended up at a diner 3 neighborhoods away, sitting in a booth with his back to the wall and a view of the parking lot. Ordered coffee he didn't drink and tried to think through his next move. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Cross," he answered. "It's Vance." She sounded tense. "I just got pulled into a meeting with Weinstein and Chen. They're asking questions about you, about conversations we've had, whether you've said anything suspicious, whether I've noticed you accessing files or systems you shouldn't." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. Said we barely talk outside of patient handoffs." She paused. "But Daniel, they're scared. Really scared. I've worked with Weinstein for 6 years and I've never seen her like this. Whatever you did, whoever you threatened, they're treating you like an existential threat to the hospital." "That's because I am." "What's going on? And don't tell me it's nothing. I'm not stupid." Daniel watched a family enter the diner, parents and 2 kids, arguing about what to order, completely oblivious to the fact that their world made sense in a way his hadn't for 5 years. "How much do you want to know?" "Everything. Because if you're going after Weinstein, if you've got actual evidence of wrongdoing, I want in." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of watching patients die when they shouldn't. Tired of filing incident reports that go nowhere. Tired of knowing the system is broken, but not having the courage to do anything about it." Her voice cracked slightly. 3 months ago, I had a patient code in the ER. 19 years old, car accident, completely salvageable. But the system flagged her as uninsured. Treatment got delayed by 45 minutes while admin tried to figure out payment. She died on my table because bureaucracy mattered more than life. Daniel closed his eyes. "What was her name?" "Jasmine Chen. No relation to Dr. Chen, just terrible coincidence. Her family sued, hospital settled, and the medical review board ruled it as an unavoidable complication due to the severity of her injuries." Vance's voice went hard. "But that's bullshit. She died because we waited, and I've been carrying that around ever since, wondering if I'm complicit for not speaking up. If you help me, your career is over. Possibly your freedom, depending on how nasty they want to get." "I know, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night." Daniel made a decision. "There's a coffee shop on Clark Street. Meet me there in an hour. Come alone, tell no one, and bring any documentation you have on cases where you suspected something was wrong. I'll be there." She hung up. Daniel sat in the diner booth staring at his cold coffee and wondered if he was leading Sarah Vance into a trap or offering her the same chance at redemption he was taking for himself. Probably both. Well, Vance showed up 50 minutes later carrying a messenger bag that looked heavy. She slid into the booth across from him, glanced around to make sure no one was paying attention, and pulled out a thick folder. 7 cases, she said quietly, all from the past year. All deaths that I think were preventable, but got ruled as complications. I've been documenting them on my own time because I kept thinking maybe I'd find a pattern, maybe I'd figure out what was going wrong. Daniel opened the folder. The first case was Jasmine Chen. The documentation was meticulous. Timeline of events, medical decisions, the exact moment when treatment got delayed. Vance had even included copies of the flagging notification from the Sentinel system, showing when the patient's insurance status triggered a hold on non-emergency procedures. "This is good work," Daniel said. "It's evidence that I failed a patient. Not exactly proud of it." "You didn't fail her. The system did." Daniel pulled out his own files, spread them on the table. "And you're not the only one who's been documenting failures." He walked her through everything. Claire's investigation into the patient deaths, the medical review board's pattern of closing cases without real investigation, the evidence that Weinstein and others were using the Sentinel system to target high-risk patients, and finally, Emily's altered medical records. Vance's face went pale as she read. "This is murder. Systematic, deliberate murder. Yes. And Weinstein's at the center of it. Her and at least 3 others, maybe more." Daniel gathered the papers. "But here's the problem. We've got circumstantial evidence, hacked data that's inadmissible in court, and accusations against powerful people who have lawyers on speed dial. If we go public now, they'll destroy us before anyone takes this seriously. So what do we need? We need someone from inside the system to testify. Someone credible who can confirm that the medical review board is deliberately covering up malpractice." Daniel met her eyes. Someone like a respected ER attending physician who's been witnessing these patterns for years. Vance sat back, processing. "You want me to go on record? I want you to tell the truth. In a legal deposition, in front of investigators, wherever it needs to be said. But yes, that means going public. That means becoming the face of this story. That means your name in headlines and your career under scrutiny and probably years of legal battles. And if I don't? Then Clara and I try to make the case with what we have, which might work, or might just get us killed while the hospital walks away clean." Vance stared at the files spread across the table. Outside, afternoon traffic was building, people heading home from jobs where the biggest stress was deadlines and bad coffee. She'd been one of those people once. Normal problems in a normal life. "My daughter just turned 6, she said quietly. "She's in 1st grade, loves dinosaurs, and thinks doctors are superheroes." Vance's hands were shaking slightly. "If I do this, if I testify against the hospital, she's going to find out her mom isn't a hero, that I watched people die and didn't stop it. Or she'll learn that her mom had the courage to make it right. That's a nice story, but the real version is messier." Vance looked up. "I'm terrified. Of losing my job, of legal consequences, of what this does to my family. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my career wondering how many patients died because I kept quiet." "So that's a yes?" "That's a yes." She took a shaky breath. "What do we do first?" Daniel checked his watch. "First, we get you somewhere safe. They already tried to grab me today. Once they realize you're helping, you'll be next on the list." "I can't just disappear. I've got custody arrangements, a schedule, patients depending on me." "Your daughter can't depend on you if you're dead." The bluntness of it made Vance flinch, but she nodded. "All right, what's the plan?" "Clara's at the state attorney general's office right now. She's dropping all our evidence on a prosecutor's desk and demanding protective custody. We need to get you there too. Once you're both under official protection, you can give formal statements and they'll have to open an investigation." "And you?" "I'm going to make sure Morrison's 3 missing operators are actually missing, because if they're not, if they're alive and hiding, they can corroborate that the program existed and that we all had training the hospital's trying to exploit." Daniel started gathering the files. "But I need you to do something first. I need you to call Weinstein. Tell her you're worried about me, that I said something concerning, and you think she should know." "Why would I do that?" "Because right now they think I'm working alone. If they believe you're still loyal to the hospital, they'll keep you in the loop, and anything they tell you becomes evidence we can use." Vance looked skeptical. "You want me to be a spy?" "I want you to be exactly who they think you are, a doctor who's concerned about a colleague but still committed to the institution. Can you do that?" She thought about it for a long moment, then pulled out her phone. "Yeah, I can do that." While Vance stepped outside to make the call, Daniel texted Morrison. "Need contact info for the operators who disappeared. All of them. Now." The response came back fast. "You're out of your mind, probably. But if they're alive and willing to testify, we've got corroboration for the program's existence. That makes everything else credible. And if they're not alive, then I need to know who killed them." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Finally, I'll send you what I have. But Cross, this is the last time I'm helping you. After this, you're on your own. Understood. A minute later, Daniel's phone buzzed with an encrypted file. 3 names, last known addresses, dates when they stopped responding to communication. He forwarded it to Clara with instructions to see if she could find anything recent. Social media, employment records, anything that proved they were still alive. Vance came back inside, face pale. I talked to Weinstein, told her I was worried about you, that you seemed paranoid and made some wild accusations. She thanked me for the heads up and said she'd handle it. How did she sound? Relieved, like I'd just confirmed something she was hoping was true. Vance sat down heavily. She also said the hospital's taking extra security measures because of recent threats. Said I should be careful going home tonight, maybe stay somewhere else for a few days. Daniel's blood went cold. That's a warning. She's telling you to get out of the line of fire because something's about to happen. Or she's genuinely concerned about staff safety. You believe that? Vance shook her head. Ciela, no, I really don't. Then we move now. Get your daughter from school, pack a bag, and head to the AG's office. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Don't stop home if you can avoid it. Just go. What about you? I'm going to follow up on Morrison's leads, see if I can find any of the missing operators before nightfall. Vance stood, hesitated. Daniel, thank you for trusting me with this, for giving me a chance to fix what I helped break. We haven't fixed anything yet. Don't thank me until we actually pull this off. She left. Daniel sat alone in the coffee shop, surrounded by evidence that could bring down an entire hospital system or get him killed trying. His phone buzzed with a message from Clara. Prosecutor just agreed to protective custody. I'm being moved to a safe location tonight. What about you? Daniel typed. Working on it. Keep your head down. You too. He paid for his coffee and walked out into the late afternoon sun. The city felt different now, sharper, more dangerous, like walking through enemy territory disguised as home. Every car could be surveillance. Every person could be a threat. His phone rang. Evan. Dad, where are you? I came home and you're not here. Daniel's heart stopped. You're home? I thought you were staying at Josh's through Monday. His parents had to go out of town. Some family emergency, so they dropped me off like an hour ago. Evan's voice went tight. But Dad, there's people here. In a car across the street. They've been sitting there since I got home and they keep looking at our building. Listen to me very carefully. Do not go outside. Lock the door. Don't answer if anyone knocks. And stay away from the windows. What's going on? I'm on my way. Just stay inside and don't open the door for anyone except me. Daniel was already running for his truck. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Dad, you're scaring me. I know, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Yeah, okay. Good, I'm coming. Daniel hung up and drove like the city was burning. He made the 15-minute drive in 8, running red lights and cutting through traffic with the kind of reckless precision he hadn't used since his combat training. The whole time, his mind was calculating how many people in the car, how armed they might be, how long before they made their move. He parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, moving through backyards and side streets until he had a view of his apartment building. The black sedan was still there, same one from earlier, or a different one. 2 men inside, both watching the entrance. Daniel pulled out his phone, called Morrison. I need backup, right now. My apartment building, they've got my son. Cross, I told you. I don't care what you told me. You owe me for 5 years of silence. You owe me for shutting down the program and scattering us. You owe me. Daniel's voice was shaking now, fear and rage mixing into something sharp. My son is 16 years old and he's trapped in an apartment with armed contractors outside. So either you help me or I call the police and tell them everything, the program, the operators, all of it. Your choice. Morrison was silent for 5 seconds that felt like hours. Where are you? 2 blocks east of my building. Stay there. I'm 15 minutes out. Don't do anything stupid before I arrive. 15 minutes is too long. Then don't do anything stupid for 14 minutes. Morrison hung up. Daniel stared at his building, at the sedan, at the windows of his apartment where Evan was hiding. 14 minutes felt like an eternity. He texted Evan. Still there? Yeah, they're still outside. Stay quiet. Help is coming. Who are those people? People who made a mistake thinking they could threaten my family. Daniel moved closer, using parked cars as cover, until he was one building away from his own. From this angle, he could see the sedan's license plate, the faces of the men inside. The driver was checking his phone. The passenger was eating something from a paper bag. They looked bored. That was a mistake. Boredom meant they weren't expecting resistance. Daniel's military training was coming back in pieces. Movement patterns, threat assessment, the particular kind of calm that settled in before violence. He'd spent 5 years trying to forget these instincts. Now he needed them. Yvonne pulled up behind the sedan. Unmarked, plain white, the kind contractors used for moving equipment or making bodies disappear. The sedan's doors opened. 4 men got out now, 2 from the sedan, 2 from the van, all of them moving with purpose toward Daniel's building. He didn't wait for Morrison, didn't calculate odds or think through consequences. His son was inside and these men were heading for the door, and that was all that mattered. Daniel moved. He came up behind the last man in line, grabbed him in a chokehold he'd learned in combat medicine training, the kind that cut off blood flow to the brain without crushing the trachea. The man struggled for 3 seconds before going limp. Daniel lowered him quietly to the sidewalk, took his radio and his keys. 3 left. They'd reached the building entrance now. One was picking the lock while the others covered him. Daniel keyed the radio. Subjects are in position. Move to secondary entrance. The static crackled. Copy. Moving now. 2 of the men broke off, heading toward the back of the building. That left one at the front door, still working the lock. Daniel walked straight up to him like he belonged there. Need some help? He asked. The man turned, confused. Who are... Daniel's fist caught him in the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, Daniel had him in another hold, dragging him away from the door and into the narrow space between buildings. Who sent you? Daniel's voice was quiet, controlled. The man tried to speak but couldn't get enough air. Daniel loosened his grip slightly. Hospital, the man gasped. Contract job. Just supposed to pick you up, bring you in for questioning. Questioning or disposal? I don't know, man. They just gave us an address and a photo. Said to bring you to a warehouse in Red Hook. How many others? Just us 4, that's it. Daniel believed him. The man's fear was too real to be faking. He tightened his grip until the man went unconscious, then zip-tied his hands with a cable he pulled from his pocket, old habit from field operations. 2 down. 2 still circling around back. Daniel entered his building through the front door, took the stairs 2 at a time. He reached his apartment just as someone started picking the lock from outside. Evan, he called through the door. It's me. Open up. The lock clicked. Evan pulled the door open, face pale. Dad, what? Get your school bag. Whatever you need for a few days, 30 seconds. But now, Evan ran to his room. Daniel watched the hallway, listening for footsteps. He could hear the contractors coming up the back stairwell, their radio chatter echoing in the concrete space. Evan came back with his backpack. Daniel grabbed his arm, pulled him toward the front stairs. They made it down 2 floors before the contractors burst through the stairwell door above them. Daniel pushed Evan ahead, kept himself between his son and the threat. Stop right there, someone shouted. Daniel didn't stop. They reached the ground floor, hit the front entrance just as Morrison's car screeched to a stop outside. Get in, Morrison yelled. Daniel shoved Evan into the back seat and dove in after him. Morrison floored it before the doors were even closed, tires screaming as they accelerated away from the building. Behind them, the contractors reached the sidewalk, radios in hand, watching the car disappear into traffic. Who the hell is this? Evan demanded, staring at Morrison. My old commanding officer, Morrison. Meet my son, Evan. Morrison glanced in the rearview mirror. Kid looks like his mother. Don't, Daniel said flatly. They drove in silence for several blocks, Morrison taking a winding route through the city to make sure they weren't being followed. Eventually, he pulled into a parking garage attached to a hotel downtown. You can't go home, Morrison said. They know where you live. They know what you drive. And after today's little performance, they know you're not going quietly. Where do we go? Morrison handed Daniel a key card. Room 847, registered under a false name. Stay there tonight. Tomorrow, I'll arrange transport out of the city. I'm not leaving. Cross, I'm not leaving until this is finished. Until Weinstein and everyone else involved in this is exposed. Daniel looked at his son's terrified face. But Evan needs to be somewhere safe. Morrison nodded slowly. I can arrange that. I've got a secure location upstate. No one knows about it except me. Your boy can stay there until this blows over. Evan grabbed Daniel's arm. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. Like hell I don't. You're my dad. I'm not running while you… While I what? Get myself killed? Daniel turned to face him. That's exactly why you need to go. Because if something happens to me, I need to know you're safe. That you're going to be okay. Tears were running down Evan's face now. This is bullshit. All of it. We should both leave. Start over somewhere else. I can't. Not yet. Why? Because of Mom? Because you think you owe her something? Evan's voice cracked. She's dead, Dad. She's been dead for 5 years. And if you keep doing this, you're going to be dead too. Then I'll be alone. Is that what you want? Daniel pulled his son into a hug, held him tight the way he hadn't since Emily's funeral. No, that's not what I want. But I can't let them keep doing this. I can't let other families go through what we went through. Evan was sobbing now, the kind of crying that came from 5 years of grief he'd been too angry to release. I don't want to lose you too. You won't, I promise. You can't promise that. You're right, I can't. Daniel pulled back, looked at his son's face. But I can promise that I'm going to fight like hell to come back to you. And when this is over, when it's really over, we're going to figure out how to be a family again. Okay? Evan nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve. Morrison cleared his throat. Touching moment. But we need to move. Hotel room now? Decisions later. They went up to the 8th floor. The room was generic corporate luxury. Clean, anonymous, forgettable. Morrison stood by the door while Daniel and Evan sat on the edge of the bed. I'll arrange transport for the kid tomorrow morning, Morrison said. Early, before the hospital realizes you've gone to ground. What about Clara and Dr. Vance? Daniel asked. Hayes is already in protective custody with the AG's office. Vance, Morrison checked his phone. According to my sources, she showed up at the same office 2 hours ago with her daughter. She's giving a formal statement right now. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. So they're safe. For now. But Cross, you need to understand something. Once Vance testifies, once the investigation officially starts, people are going to start covering their tracks, deleting evidence, intimidating witnesses, making problems disappear. Morrison met his eyes. You've got maybe 48 hours before they either get arrested or go completely underground. Whatever you're planning to do, you need to do it fast. I need to find the missing operators. If even one of them is alive and willing to testify, they're not alive. The words hung in the air like smoke. How do you know? Daniel asked quietly. Morrison pulled out his phone, showed Daniel a series of photos. 3 men, all roughly Daniel's age, all dead in ways that had been staged to look like accidents or suicides. I confirmed the last one this morning, Morrison said. That makes 4 operators dead in 6 months, all of them in cities with major hospital systems, all of them working in emergency medicine, and all of them dying shortly after their hospitals started showing signs of the same patterns you found at Memorial General. Daniel stared at the photos, his training letting him see past the staging to the reality beneath. These weren't suicides, these were executions. Someone's cleaning house, Daniel said. Someone's eliminating anyone who can prove the program existed and that hospitals are exploiting its operators. Morrison put the phone away. Which makes you target number 5, and unlike the others, you saw it coming. So what do I do? Morrison smiled grimly. You do what you're trained to do. You survive. And then you make them pay for underestimating you. He left. Daniel and Evan sat in the hotel room, the weight of everything settling around them like concrete. Dad, Evan said quietly, those men in the photos, did you know them? Some of them. We trained together. And now they're dead because someone's scared of what they know. Yes. Evan looked at his father, really looked at him, seeing past the exhausted nurse and the invisible survivor to the soldier underneath. You're not going to run, are you? No. Good. Evan's voice was steadier now. Because if you ran, if you let them win, those people died for nothing. Mom died for nothing. And I don't think I could forgive you for that. Daniel pulled his son close again, and they sat there in the anonymous hotel room, making plans for a war neither of them had asked for, but both of them were committed to fighting. Outside, the city continued its evening rhythm, oblivious to the fact that everything was about to break open. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Daniel had slept in 40-minute intervals, waking each time to check the door, the windows, the hallway outside. Old instincts die hard, and right now those instincts were the only thing keeping him breathing. Evan was sprawled across one of the beds, finally unconscious after fighting sleep for hours. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, he looked younger than 16. Looked like the kid who used to climb into bed with Daniel and Emily during thunderstorms, believing his parents could protect him from anything. Daniel had failed that kid, failed to protect his mother, failed to be present for 5 years of grief. But maybe, if he survived the next 48 hours, he could still be the father Evan deserved. His phone buzzed. Morrison. Car downstairs in 20 minutes. Driver will take the boy upstate. You sure about this? Daniel looked at his sleeping son and typed, I'm sure. Then finish it. Whatever you're planning, make it count. 20 minutes later, Daniel woke Evan gently. They didn't talk much while getting ready, just the practical exchange of someone who'd learned to pack light and move fast. When Morrison's car arrived, they rode the elevator down together in silence. The driver was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd seen worse than whatever Daniel was dealing with. She nodded at Evan, gestured to the back seat. Wait, Evan said. He turned to Daniel and for a moment looked like he was going to say something profound. Instead, he just grabbed his father in a fierce hug. Don't be a hero, just come back. I will. You better. Evan pulled away, swiped at his eyes. Because when this is over, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. 5 years worth. I know. Evan got in the car. Daniel watched it pull away, disappear into morning traffic, and felt something in his chest crack open, not breaking, just making room for the possibility that maybe, if he survived, they could actually heal. His phone rang. Clara. Vance finished her testimony last night, she said without preamble. The prosecutor's opening a formal investigation into Memorial General. They're requesting all patient records, employee files, financial documents. It's happening, Daniel. What about protective custody for you and Vance? We're both in a safe house. Vance's daughter, too. They've got U.S. Marshals rotating shifts. Clara paused. But Daniel, the prosecutor wants you to come in, give a statement. They need your testimony about the program, about what you witnessed at the hospital, all of it. I will, but not yet. Why not? Because testifying locks me into a legal process that takes months or years. And right now, I've got maybe 24 hours before the hospital destroys whatever evidence we haven't already collected. Daniel was walking now, moving through the city streets with purpose. I need to get back inside Memorial General one more time. Get the original files before they disappear. That's insane. They tried to kidnap you yesterday. They'll kill you if you walk back in there. Probably, but I'm the only one who knows where Weinstein keeps the hard copies. The physical files that can't be remotely deleted or altered. If I can get those, we've got undeniable proof. Clara was quiet for a moment. You're going to break into her office. I'm going to retrieve evidence. There's a difference. Not legally, there isn't, she sighed. All right. What do you need from me? Access to the hospital's security system. I need to know camera placement, guard rotations, which doors are monitored. Can you get that? I'm literally sitting next to a U.S. Marshal right now. If I hack into a hospital's security network, I'm committing a federal crime in front of law enforcement. So wait until he goes to the bathroom. Despite everything, Clara laughed. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the stupidest. Can it be both? Yeah, it probably is. She paused. Give me 2 hours. I'll send you what I can find. Daniel spent those 2 hours in a public library, using their computers to research everything he could about Memorial General's physical layout. Fire exits, maintenance access, electrical rooms. The hospital was a maze if you didn't know it, but Daniel had worked there for 3 years. He knew which hallways were empty during shift changes, which doors had broken locks, which security guards took long smoke breaks. At noon, Clara sent him an encrypted file with camera locations and patrol schedules. The weak point was the loading dock between 2 and 3 a.m., minimal coverage, skeleton crew, easy access to the service elevators that ran to the administrative floors. Daniel texted Morrison. Need a distraction at Memorial General tonight. Something big enough to pull security away from the administrative wing. The response came back. How big? Fire alarm? Smoke. No actual fire. Enough chaos to evacuate non-essential areas. I can arrange that. When? 2:15 a.m. You're going to owe me for this. Add it to the tab. Daniel spent the afternoon preparing. He went to a hardware store, bought dark clothes, gloves, a small pry bar. Went to a pharmacy, picked up zip ties and duct tape. Bought a cheap burner phone and programmed in emergency numbers. Clara, Morrison, the prosecutor's office, 911. At 6 p.m., he checked into a different hotel under a false name, paid cash, and tried to sleep. It didn't work. His mind kept running scenarios, calculating risks, replaying the faces of the 4 dead operators. Around midnight, he gave up and started getting ready. Dark jeans, black jacket, gloves tucked in his pocket. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and saw someone who'd stopped being invisible. For better or worse, he was visible now. Target, threat. Problem that needed solving. Good. Let them see him coming. At 1:45 a.m., Daniel drove to Memorial General, parked 3 blocks away, approached on foot, moving through shadows like he'd been trained to do a lifetime ago. The loading dock was exactly where it was supposed to be, exactly as unguarded as Clara's intel had suggested. He waited in the darkness, watching, counting guard rotations. At 2:10, his burner phone buzzed. Morrison. Fire alarm triggers in 5 minutes. You'll have approximately 12 minutes before they realize it's false. Don't waste them. At exactly 2:15, alarms started shrieking throughout the hospital. Daniel watched as security guards rushed toward the main building, radios crackling with confusion. He slipped through the loading dock door and headed for the service elevator. The administrative wing was empty. Everyone evacuated to the parking lot. Daniel moved quickly but carefully, checking corners, avoiding the few cameras Clara had marked as active. Weinstein's office was on the 4th floor, corner suite with a view of the city. The door was locked. Daniel used the pry bar, felt the jam give with a crack that sounded too loud in the empty hallway. Inside, the office was exactly what he expected. Expensive furniture, diplomas on the wall, photos of Weinstein receiving awards and shaking hands with politicians. Daniel ignored all of it and went straight for the filing cabinets. The first 2 were unlocked, full of standard administrative paperwork. The third was locked with a combination that Daniel didn't have time to figure out. He used the pry bar again. The metal bent but held. He braced his foot against the wall and pulled harder. Something inside the lock mechanism snapped and the drawer slid open. Inside were files. Dozens of them. Patient records that should have been digitized. Medical review board minutes that weren't in the official database. Handwritten notes documenting decisions that were never meant to become public. Daniel pulled out his phone, started photographing everything. Page after page, working as fast as he could while keeping the images clear enough to read. Emily's original file was there, complete with the unaltered timeline and the notes showing exactly when Weinstein had realized the treatment delays were going to kill her. Jasmine Chen's file. Patricia Morales. All 8 of the cases Clara had identified, plus 7 more Daniel hadn't known about. 15 deaths, 15 families who'd been lied to, 15 cases where the medical review board had deliberately covered up malpractice because treating the patients correctly would have cost more than letting them die. Daniel's hands were shaking with rage as he photographed the last file. He was shoving the originals into his backpack when he heard footsteps in the hallway. The door swung open. Dr. Weinstein stood there, flanked by 2 security guards, her expression a mix of satisfaction and contempt. "I knew you'd come back," she said quietly. "Knew you couldn't resist playing the hero one more time." Daniel straightened slowly, calculating distances and angles. 2 guards, both armed. Weinstein blocking the door. The window behind him was 4 floors up, survivable if he was desperate, but not ideal. The fire alarm was a nice touch, Weinstein continued. Very dramatic, but we've been monitoring the building's security footage remotely since yesterday. The moment you entered the loading dock, I got an alert. She gestured to the guards. Take him. They moved forward. Daniel let them get close, then drove his elbow into the first guard's solar plexus while sweeping the second guard's legs. Both men went down hard. Daniel was past them and heading for the door when Weinstein pulled a pistol from her jacket pocket. Stop, she said. I will shoot you. Daniel stopped. The gun was small, probably a .380, but at this range it would do the job. He raised his hand slowly. You're not a killer, he said. No, I'm a doctor who's very tired of people threatening everything I've built. Weinstein's hand was steady. You want to know the truth, Mr. Cross? Yes, I made hard decisions. Yes, some patients died who might have lived with unlimited resources and infinite time. But this hospital serves 50,000 people a year. 50,000 lives that depend on us staying open, staying funded, staying viable. Your wife was one person. A tragedy, certainly. But weighed against the greater good? Against all the people we've saved? The math is simple. You're talking about human beings like they're numbers on a spreadsheet. I'm talking about reality. The reality you'd understand if you'd spent 30 years in a system that's designed to fail. Weinstein's voice rose slightly. Do you know how much it costs to run a hospital? How little insurance reimburses? How impossible it is to provide perfect care to everyone who walks through those doors? We make impossible choices every single day. And yes, sometimes those choices mean someone dies. But the alternative is the entire hospital shuts down and everyone dies. That's not a justification, that's a rationalization. Call it whatever you want, it's still the truth. She gestured with the gun. Now give me the files and the phone. All of it. Then you're going to walk out of here and disappear. Go back to whatever hole Morrison can find for you. Because if you don't, if you try to fight this, I will bury you so deep that no one will ever find the body. Daniel lowered his hand slowly. You're too late. I already sent the photos to the prosecutor's office. They've got everything. Weinstein's expression flickered, just for a second, but enough to show doubt. You're bluffing, am I? Daniel pulled out his phone, showed her the sent messages. Timestamp 20 minutes ago, recipient confirmed. Your files, your notes, your handwritten documentation of 15 murders. It's all in their hands now. You can shoot me, destroy the originals, burn this whole building down. Won't matter. The evidence is already out there. The gun wavered. Weinstein's face was pale now, the confidence draining away as reality caught up with her. You've destroyed this hospital, she whispered. Destroyed careers. Destroyed lives. For what? Revenge? Justice. There's a difference. Not to the families of the patients we won't be able to save when this place shuts down. Not to the staff who'll lose their jobs. Not to the community that depends on us. Weinstein lowered the gun. You think you're a hero, Mr. Cross. But all you've done is trade 15 deaths for hundreds, maybe thousands. If this hospital can only survive by killing patients, then it deserves to shut down. Weinstein laughed, but it was bitter, broken. You're so certain, so absolutely sure you're right. Must be nice, living in a world that simple. She raised the gun again, and for a moment Daniel thought she was actually going to shoot him. Then she turned it on herself. No! Daniel lunged forward, but the two guards were on him, pulling him back. He fought them, but they were younger and fresher, and he'd already burned through his adrenaline. The gunshot was louder than it should have been in the enclosed space. Dr. Barbara Weinstein collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across the expensive carpet. The guards released Daniel, one of them already on the radio calling for medical assistance. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, his training kicking in automatically. Check for pulse, assess the wound, apply pressure. But he already knew it was too late. Knew it from the angle of entry, the amount of blood, the particular stillness that came when life stopped fighting. Why? He asked, even though she was already gone. Why couldn't you just stop? The hospital erupted into chaos around him. More security arrived. EMTs who'd been staged for the fire alarm evacuation rushed in. Someone pulled Daniel away from the body, someone else cuffed his hands, and through all of it, he just kept thinking about Weinstein's last words. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. What if she was right? The police arrested Daniel at the scene. They took him downtown, put him in an interrogation room, and left him there for 3 hours while lawyers and prosecutors argued about jurisdiction and evidence and whether he'd technically committed any crimes that weren't already justified by whistleblower protections. Eventually, a detective came in. Older woman, tired eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. You've had quite a night, Mr. Cross. Daniel said nothing. Dr. Weinstein is dead. Self-inflicted gunshot wound, multiple witnesses. The hospital's in full crisis mode. And you're sitting here covered in blood with a backpack full of stolen medical records. She sat down across from him. Want to tell me what the hell happened? I want a lawyer. You've got 3 of them arguing outside right now. U.S. attorney, state prosecutor, and some guy from a civil rights organization who seems to think you're a hero. She pulled out a notepad. But here's the thing, I don't care about the legal circus. I care about whether you killed Dr. Weinstein. I didn't. She shot herself. Why? Because I exposed her. Proved she'd been systematically letting patients die to protect the hospital's bottom line. She couldn't live with that becoming public. The detective studied his face. You believe that? I was there. I saw it happen. That's not what I asked. She leaned forward. Do you believe someone who spent 30 years as a doctor, who saved thousands of lives, killed herself because you exposed some bad decisions? Or do you think maybe it's more complicated than that? Daniel closed his eyes. He could still see Weinstein's face in that final moment. Not evil, not monstrous, just exhausted, broken. Someone who'd made impossible choices until she couldn't tell the difference between necessary and unforgivable. I think she was human, he said quietly. I think she convinced herself that what she was doing was right. And when she couldn't maintain that lie anymore, when she had to face what she'd actually done, she couldn't survive it. And you? How are you going to survive it? I don't know yet. The detective nodded slowly, closed her notepad. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Exposing corruption, protecting future patients. That matters. But Mr. Cross, be prepared. This doesn't end clean. It never does. She left. Daniel sat alone in the interrogation room, hands still cuffed, waiting for whatever came next. What came next was Morrison. He walked into the room like he owned it, nodded to the guard outside, and sat down across from Daniel. The U.S. attorney is cutting you a deal, Morrison said. Full immunity in exchange for testimony about the program, the operators, everything you know about military medical training being exploited by civilian hospitals. What about the break-in? The stolen files? Whistleblower protection? As long as you cooperate, they're not charging you with anything. Morrison pulled out a key, unlocked the cuffs. You won, Cross. Against every odd, against every person who told you to walk away, you actually won. Daniel rubbed his wrists. Doesn't feel like winning. It never does. Not when you're standing in the wreckage. Morrison stood up. But here's what you accomplished. Memorial General is under federal investigation. The entire Medical Review Board is being audited. Sentinel Medical Solutions is facing congressional hearings, and 8 families are getting closure about how their loved ones actually died. 15 families. There were 7 more cases in Weinstein's files. Then 15 families. That's 15 people who get to know the truth, who get justice, or something close to it. Morrison moved toward the door. Your son is safe. The journalist and the doctor are safe. And you're alive, which frankly surprises me. So yeah, Cross, you won. Now figure out what you're going to do with that victory. He left. Daniel sat alone for another hour before a lawyer finally came to process his release. The sun was coming up when he walked out of the police station, blinking in the harsh morning light. Clara was waiting on the steps. Hey, she said. Hey, you look like hell. Feel worse. Daniel sat down beside her. It's over? The investigation? Just beginning. The hospital's fighting everything. Lawyers are filing motions. It's going to be years before this fully resolves. Clara pulled out her phone, showed him a news headline. Major hospital under investigation for systematic malpractice. But the story's out. Can't put that back in the bottle. Weinstein's dead. I know. I heard. Clara was quiet for a moment. You okay? No. But I will be. Daniel looked at the city waking up around them. People heading to work, living normal lives, completely unaware that a hospital system had just imploded. What happens to all the patients who depend on Memorial General? If it shuts down, where do they go? Other hospitals, community clinics, the system adapts. Clara put her phone away. But Daniel, that's not your responsibility. You exposed corruption. You stopped people from being killed for profit. What happens next is on the people who created this mess, not the person who revealed it. Weinstein said I traded 15 deaths for hundreds, maybe thousands. Weinstein was trying to justify what she'd done. Don't let her guilt become yours. Clara stood up. Come on. Vance wants to see you. She's got something to say. They drove to the safe house where Vance and her daughter were staying. It was a suburban house that looked like every other house on the block. Deliberate anonymity for people who needed to disappear. Vance answered the door, pulled Daniel into a hug before he could say anything. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me, for giving me the chance to make this right. You're the one who testified. You did the hard part. We both did." She stepped back, gestured inside. "I've been thinking about what comes next. After the investigation, after the trials. I can't go back to Memorial General, but I don't want to stop practicing medicine." "What are you thinking?" "Community clinic. Somewhere that actually serves people who need care, not just people who can pay for it." Vance smiled slightly. "And I was hoping maybe you'd want to help build it. Use that training of yours the way it was meant to be used." Daniel thought about it. A clinic where the goal was actually saving lives instead of protecting profit margins, where the hard decisions were about how to help people, not how to minimize liability. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'd like that." The investigation took 18 months. Daniel testified 6 times in various proceedings: grand jury, congressional hearings, civil depositions. Each time he told the same story: the program, the training, the systematic abuse of patients, the cover-ups. Memorial General didn't shut down, but it changed. New leadership, new protocols. The Sentinel Medical Solutions system was removed entirely, replaced with safeguards that prioritize patient care over financial optimization. 3 executives went to prison: Dr. Chen, Robert Klein, Paul Henderson. Others took plea deals and cooperated with ongoing investigations into how widespread the problem was across the healthcare system. Evan came home after 2 months upstate. They didn't fix everything overnight. 5 years of distance couldn't be erased with a few conversations. But they started talking, really talking, about Emily, about grief, about what it meant to be a family when part of that family was missing. 1 year after Weinstein's death, Daniel and Vance opened their clinic in the same neighborhood where Memorial General had failed so many patients. It wasn't big, wasn't fancy, just a storefront with decent equipment and a philosophy that said every life mattered equally. On the first day, an older woman came in with chest pain. High-risk patient, complicated insurance, exactly the kind of person who would have been deprioritized in the old system. Daniel treated her with everything he knew, used every technique from the program, every lesson from 5 years of watching the system fail. Saved her life in a small exam room with fluorescent lights and equipment that had seen better days. When she left, grateful and breathing and alive, Vance looked at Daniel and smiled. "This is what it's supposed to feel like," she said. "Helping people without calculating whether they're worth saving." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "This is what it's supposed to feel like." That evening, he drove home to the apartment he and Evan had moved into, bigger than the old place, fewer ghosts. His son was at the kitchen table doing homework, looking up when Daniel came in. "How was the first day?" Evan asked. "Good. Busy. We saw 32 patients." "That's a lot." "It is." Daniel sat down across from him. "But every single one of them walked out alive, so I'll take it." Evan smiled. The real kind. The kind Daniel hadn't seen since before Emily died. "Mom would be proud of you, of what you did." "You think?" "I know. She always said you were the strongest person she'd ever met. Said you just didn't know it yet." Evan's voice was quiet. "I think you know it now." Daniel felt tears burning behind his eyes, but didn't try to hide them. "I think I'm starting to." They sat there in this kitchen, father and son, in an apartment that finally felt like home instead of a place where they were waiting for life to start again. Outside, the city continued its evening rhythm, people finishing work, heading home, living the ordinary lives that Daniel had spent 5 years believing he didn't deserve. But maybe he was wrong. Maybe surviving wasn't the same as giving up. Maybe being invisible had been the opposite of being strong. Maybe the hardest thing wasn't enduring pain, but choosing to fight back against the systems that caused it. His phone buzzed. "Clara, just got word 2 more hospitals are under investigation for similar practices. Your testimony helped break the case open. You changed the system, Daniel." He typed back, "We changed it, all of us together." "Fair enough. Drinks this weekend to celebrate?" "Yeah, I'd like that." Daniel set down his phone and looked at his son, at the home they'd built from the wreckage of their grief, at the life that had almost been destroyed but somehow survived. "You know what I learned?" he said to Evan. "What?" That being a hero isn't about being perfect or fearless or knowing all the answers. It's about showing up when it matters, about choosing to fight even when you're terrified, about protecting people who can't protect themselves. Daniel paused. Your mom taught me that. And even though she's gone, even though we lost her to a system that valued money over lives, she's still teaching me every single day. Evan nodded, wiping his eyes. I miss her. Me too. But I think we're going to be okay. Not the same as we were, but okay in a new way. Yeah, Evan said. I think so too. They ordered pizza that night and ate it while watching a movie neither of them paid attention to. It was ordinary, normal, the kind of evening Daniel had stopped believing he deserved. But here's what he'd learned in 18 months of testimony and investigation and slowly rebuilding his life. You don't have to earn ordinary. You don't have to deserve normal. You just have to survive long enough to remember what it feels like. And Daniel had survived. Against private contractors and corrupt administrators and systems designed to grind people down until they stopped fighting. He'd survived by refusing to stay invisible, by choosing to stand up even when standing up meant risking everything. Emily had been right. He was strong. He just hadn't known it yet. Now he did. And that knowledge, that certainty that he could face the worst the world had to offer and come out still breathing, still fighting, still human, that was worth more than any victory in court or headlines in newspapers. Because at the end of the day, after all the investigations and trials and congressional hearings, the thing that mattered most was this. Daniel Cross went home every night to a son who was learning to trust him again. Went to work every morning to a clinic where lives got saved for the right reasons. Went to sleep every night knowing that 15 families had closure, that future patients would be protected, that the system had changed because he'd refused to accept the way things were. He wasn't a perfect father, wasn't a perfect doctor, wasn't the hero Claire's articles sometimes made him out to be. But he was present, he was fighting, he was alive. And for someone who'd spent 5 years as a ghost in his own life, that felt like more than enough. That felt like coming home.